General,
So
you said in your reply brief that the children of slaves who were brought here unlawfully, in defiance of laws forbidding the slave trade, would in fact be citizens. And we can imagine that their parents were not only brought here in violation of United States law, but were here against their will, and so maybe felt allegiance to the countries where they were from. And you say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual. So how do you get there? You say it in just a few sentences, so can you elaborate?
Sure. If you look at I think if you look at the 19th century sources, what you see is that even though their entry may have been unlawful, 19th century antebellum law never treated their presence as unlawful. In fact, quite the opposite. One of the amici, in fact, points to like a Mississippi statute, which probably is replicated throughout the South before the Civil War, that says slaves in Mississippi have an indefeasible domicile in Mississippi. In other words, even if they run away, if they get away, Mississippi says, nope, you still live here. Right? And so it would be astonishing, in other words, for the opponents of the 14th Amendment to say, oh, these people were not domiciled and therefore it goes the other way, because actually U.S. law, even if they were brought in illegally and through an illegal slave trade, once they were there by
well, their intent is to return as soon as they can, let's say. So they're here, they're resident, and maybe under your theory, which says, well, lawfulness for a different purpose, but they're here, they're resident, let's take your assumption that they're not here unlawfully. But let's say they don't have an intent to stay. They want to escape and go back the second they can. Are they domiciled?
Under the 19th century law, I think this is the flip side of the hypothetical that we were talking about earlier. Under 19th century law, they are treated as domiciled in the United States, so it would be astonishing. And the debates in the congressional floor talk about not this specific case, but they say, look, slaves who have been forced to come here and have been here are lawfully domiciled here. They don't use the ways domiciled, like they use allegiance. They say they don't have allegiance to, once they've been forced to come here, they don't have allegiance to any foreign or African potentate, and therefore
But General,
how would that apply to the children of illegally trafficked people today? Would the same reasoning apply?
It would turn on whether the parents are lawfully domiciled in the United States.
So if they're brought in illegally, but then they choose to remain and they want to remain and they're domiciled, you would say that their lawful presence is not dictated by whether they were brought here lawfully or not. And that's different from someone who, say, crosses the border unlawfully.
Yeah, I think it would turn on whether their presence is lawful.
General,
in other words, obviously there may be many other important things that could be done to assist people like that. The question is, if they give birth to someone in the United States, that person naturally a citizen, that would turn, based on the original public meaning of the clause, on the lawfulness of their presence. Are they domiciled?
Can't hear you, bro.
Good everything. Good everything.
Good everything. Good everything.
Does he have a dead worm in his head too? Is it contagious? Like what's happening?
I don't know. I think that might be a prerequisite for anyone who was one of Trump's personal lawyers, whether it be John Sauer there, who absolutely sounds like Bobby Kennedy Jr., doesn't he? Or even Todd Blanche, the current Attorney General and Librarian of Congress and 50. I think to be one of Trump's lawyers, you have to match or be less than his intellect. And since Trump's brain has been eaten, I think you have to have. So worm would be a more efficient way of having your brain eaten. Yeah. That was great. Have you ever had, I'm sure you have many times, students who would come and prepared for a class presentation, and then you get peppered in with questions and they start stammering and stuttering. You like, you just stop. That was John Sauer this week.
Okay. You do know you're going to be sitting before I was shocked, Amy Coney Barrett. I said, oh, she's been hanging out I feel like she's been hanging out with Ketanji Brown Jackson. I feel like some influence, Dr. Carr. I feel like something has influenced it. I was very surprised. Were you surprised that she was?
No, and I tell you why. I don't think anyone's surprised who understands that there are limits even to naked displays of ideology when it comes to the law. I won't be surprised if this decision that we'll get, and we talk about the statutory grounds or the constitutional grounds in a minute, however they decided, which is why the lawyer for the ACLU was just excellent to give herself a birthright citizen. Her parents, of course, come from somewhere else, but Cecilia Wang was excellent in this. When asked and pressed, it might have been, it was either Roberts or McConnell Gorsuch, but she said, we'll take a win on either the statutory grounds or the 14th Amendment, the constitutional grounds. Of course, we prefer the constitutional grounds to settle this, but no, I wasn't surprised because it could be 8-1. Clarence Thomas, who I'm not sure can spell the word law if you give him the L and the W. Clarence Thomas will probably just take the ideologue position. There is a position that Sauer was defending. It's just so patently absurd that the lawyers and the legal scholars who adhere to it, and it's all kind of congeals around the question of domicile, which we'll talk about in a minute. They could fit in the squares behind us, maybe 2 on your side, 2 on my side. Maybe there are 4 people in the country who know something about the law who would make this absurd argument. But an Alito might go with Thomas because Alito is a purebred racist, but he does, I think, have a more of a respect for the law than the consensual manservant called Geechee Clarence Thomas. So it might be 6-2. I'm sorry, 7-2. But no, I'm not surprised at all because the language is clear. The language of the 14th Amendment is clear, and the language of every case, every single case that has reinforced that language, beginning with that Watershed 1898 case, Wong Kim, has reinforced that. So no, I wasn't surprised at all. She was asking a very specific question though. Her specific question, which is why I think we should start here because it involved us. And right. ADOS, I got something for you this morning. ADOS, your master don't want you no more. They showed you at the UN and they showed you on Wednesday. But what she was asking, and I'll make it very simple at this point, we'll talk about it a little bit more. The question she was really asking is, before there was a 14th Amendment, no, it's before 1870, before really even there was a Civil Rights Act of 1866, those Africans who were brought here, how would you define them? And his answer was very telling. Just before that, Gorsuch asked him about the indigenous people. We'll talk about that too. But yeah, no, I wasn't surprised because there's no way for them to get to where Sauer wants them to get without just saying, we don't give a damn about the law. And at least 7 of them want to maintain the idea that they care about the law. Right. Yeah, right. So I wasn't surprised on that principle alone. Yeah.
Everybody, welcome to In Class with Carr, episode 317. We are here talking about today Trump versus Barbara Birthright Citizenship, the case that was brought forward to the Supreme Court, SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. This week, the President of the United States was in court, which I heard was the first time, it was a precedent for the president to sit in the court while this case is being argued. I'm sure to intimidate, but I feel like this country is run by not just immature, morally bereft people, but folk who have been told a lie so long to themselves that they are not used to understanding when you are actually taking an L, like Gino Auriemma last night, you know, when Dawn Staley.
Something happened to Gino? Something happened to Gino last night?
He lost for the first time in 54 games and was not.
Wait, Gino lost?
Where? Stop.
Of course you lost, MF. You got your booty handed to you and you couldn't take it. Another black woman put them toes in the crack of that booty. Gino is the most he can't take it.
Our toes will be nowhere near their asses. Okay, Dr. Carr, we will not put nobody part nowhere near the booties.
No,
okay?
but you know, but Don Staley from North Philly, they be saying, "Oh, Gino from Philly." Yeah, nah, it's the difference between North Philly and the rest of Philly. And I just wish perhaps they had let him go since he walked up in there like he wanted to get it, and Dawn was ready. You understand what I'm saying?
There was a part of me that also wished that he had, wished that he would.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, but
they can handle it Monday though. They can handle it Monday after Easter Sunday. Let them go on and play for the championship. Because if they had dusted it up, you know them white boys would have disqualified Dawn from coaching on Sunday, like she started. And all she was saying was, "I would never do that. I would never disrespect." Then they gonna lie on her and say that she didn't shake his hand. And they got the video. They shake your hands. And your girl ripped her own jersey. What you talking about? Ripped jersey?
But it was so. I think an example of what we're living in. When the
Yeah.
playing field
Yes.
is even, and it's still not even, by the way.
No.
Because I don't see any women coaching on the men's side. Just asking for a friend. But when the playing field is even and you actually lose, you know, you've changed the rules, you've set the thing up for you to always win, and then you lost. And you've never learned. And I was like, what lesson are you teaching your players? You walked off and didn't even know sportsmanship. I felt bad for those girls on that team who had to watch their, you know, and still try to have some kind of sportsmanship. And your coach is the example. But this is the country that we live in. I just think there's a parallel to be examined. And the lesson is to keep winning. The lesson is to never shrink. The lesson is no matter what they try to set up, you go hard for the whole game. You don't give up. You don't let up, and you don't abdicate. Okay.
Yeah, I think you can win though from places other than Columbia, South Carolina, or Stores, Connecticut. I don't know why you black girls, y'all need to stop going to Stores, Connecticut. But that's all right.
So for the parents who watch this, and would still send their children to Stores, Connecticut, and you're a black, shame on you. Asia Wilson wanted to go to, I think, Duke or North Carolina because she said the boys on the campus were really cute. And her mother said, okay, so you're going to have to call that black woman and tell her you're not coming. You're going to have to call her yourself and look her in the face.
Oh.
That black woman that you're not going to be playing with her. And Asia was like, oh, okay, when you put it that way, I'm not going
to need to go. No Duke Blue Devils. And with all the love and admiration and respect for Don Staley and on them, I'd love whenever the coach at South Carolina State decides that they've had enough time at their, slide on over to Orangeburg, Don. You can bring them girls with you because we talked about this on the air this week. I really do believe, and you're much more obviously well studied and experienced about this than I am. So let me just ask you rather than saying it. Of the so-called revenue sports, if there were one that could take root at an HBCU and break through this kind of pay to play, all this stuff, do you think women's basketball might be the one that would be the easiest to convert on a short term, or would it not? Is it not possible at all?
I think it is absolutely. I mean, Deion Sanders gave a peek into what that could look like, because here we're living in a capitalist society. That's what they tell us, right? So if it's supply and demand, if the demand is at the place, if the demand is at Jackson State, if the demand is at South Carolina State or Claflin or Howard, or if the demand is there, guess where the money's going to go? So it's really, I think about the Fab Five all the time. If they didn't go to Michigan but went to Morehouse instead of Michigan, would they still be Fab Five? You know, and people talk about the resources, but we're talking about the resources are us. We're the resource. So those 5 gentlemen who met at a McDonald's, all-American game, decided to go together to a college and play, or any number. And now with the portal, I mean, Audie Crooks' whole entire team left. The coach was trash. It was awful. They all left, and Audie Crooks finally entered the portal. She can go anywhere. So what if they all decided to go someplace like an HBCU? And yes, the facilities aren't the best or something, they all have all of these arguments, but Shiloh, last I looked, still goes back to Jackson. Still, Shiloh still misses Jackson. So
of course he does.
Relegated to basketball. I think football could also, when we're seeing that now with the ex-football NFL coaches coaching at HBCUs, whether we're talking about Eddie. So
Eddie George, and then he left Tennessee State and went to Bowling Green. And last I heard, he was doing quite well. Wait, haven't heard much from him. Yeah, the whole point is that I think football would be more difficult because they've clearly made that a straight pay to play. Let me give a lineman $1 million to come to Ann Arbor or to go down to Austin, Texas. We'll pay you $1.2 million to be, to run it back. I mean, they're just straight buying people now.
I have a question.
Was that?
Are there any black people with money?
Not enough.
No,
not enough. Robert Smith and Oprah, and you name Jay-Z, and let's name people with money. I mean, for them to pool their money and then say they're going to buy. First of all, the lawsuit will come from Ed Bloom, that miserable racist creeping around the front steps of the Supreme Court like some kind of Ichabod Crane-looking janitor. He would sue and say that you're using money racially. You see the Fearless Fund. You see what they did this week with the CBC. I don't know that would hold up in court, but they would try to slow it down. But I think most importantly, the question for me would be, which of the eyeball attracting sports has not yet been hit? And ironically here, the sexism, the misogyny in this society is such that now that the WNBA has clawed their way to basically the last person on the bench of an NBA team, a tenth of what he gets, and they celebrating because they finally made it to six figures. Well, in women's basketball, they aren't yet buying athletes like they are even in men's basketball. So I think a women's team could slip under the radar for a couple of years, generate the eyeballs, and maybe give us a chance with like a flame hitting some dry kindling. So by the time they figure out, okay, we got to pay them too, their racism, their white, deep misogyny as well, they still wouldn't pay the people at stores. They still wouldn't pay UCLA or Texas, even though they would pay them more. But by then, we would have already captured the lightning in a jar. Like you said, Deion had a chance, but maybe y'all now understand. I mean, Deion has been incredibly successful at Colorado. He's won double digits every year. Wait, hold on. What's going on? I told y'all what was going to happen to Deion had his chance, and they was like, we got to get this guy out of Jackson, Mississippi. They backed up the Brinks truck and broke the back of the possibility of football doing it. But I think women's basketball could do it.
I go back to women's tennis because that was one of the first places. And by the way, shout out to the Nobel Prize laureate that argued the case for the women's basketball in WNBA for free.
Yes.
The brilliant woman.
Yes.
But women's tennis gets more. When Serena and Venus were playing, they got more ratings. People watch that. And I still think women's tennis gets more. And they were able to argue with Venus and Billie Jean King for equal pay. And they got it. And the argument was, well, the men played 3 out of 5 and the women played 2 out of 3. Didn't matter. It's ratings, right? So if you're getting the ratings, it's corporate. No longer do you have to worry about the boosters as much as you do the corporate. But I was thinking about this baseball player, softball player, Najeri Kennedy, who made history. She got a $1 million NIL deal. She's a pitcher. And I was thinking about how they brought her there and paid her basically. So there's already a precedent for this, even though this president, so weird. Why is he involved in this? Trying to stop the plantation from paying the people.
You answered the question.
God.
Well, he doesn't have much longer to be against anything except the worms. So, I mean, we let him talk.
All right. And how does this relate to this? I know this birthright citizenship was like boom, boom, boom. I talked with Keith Ellison this week about it as well. And, I was thinking about you. I tried to reach out to Angie Porter. I was like, somebody please come on and talk to me about this. Is this possible? Is this going to happen? And you're a whole ass, you got a whole ass law degree and you teach it at Howard as well. Why bring a case that fundamentally is not just flawed, but is impossible to basically win given the precedents?
But the two reasons, I think. The main reason, well, the moonshot, and shout out to the brother who was headed toward the moon as we speak. And I know Kemet and them talked about it. He's a Sigma, so I'm glad he's out there, the brother. You know, make sure y'all don't leave him out there somewhere in space and come back like, oh, I don't know what happened. He went out there anyway. But the moonshot is to hope you can win, but they're not going to win. Now, as I talk about a little bit later, the question is whether they were ruled on the statute, the 1952 or 3 statute, or the 14th Amendment. But either way, I think it's a losing case. But the other reason, which ultimately in the long run or the intermediate run, because white supremacy's death rattle we're living in, and I'm grateful. I didn't think I was going to live to see it, but thanks to Bozo and his crew, they've accelerated the timetable, so I think we may live to see it.
Wow.
In the intermediate time, in this kind of shorter term, the objective is to introduce the idea as a legitimate idea. They've already won that. Regardless of what the court does, we are talking about something that is patently absurd. In a legal sense, metaphorically, it would be like saying it's not daytime on the East Coast of the United States. And people saying, well, how are we determining day? What does day mean? I mean, does day mean a clock? Well, we're using the definition of day that goes back to the Roman statute. And the fact that we're even talking about whether it's daytime or not, they already won that. We shouldn't be talking about birthright citizenship. So whether they win or lose in the court, now they go out in the street and say, you're not a birthright citizen. Why? Because I see your slanty eyes or I see your olive colored skin. So it doesn't matter whether you're a citizen or not. The fact that it's in people's mouths is the propaganda war, and they won that war already. And I think that's why you now the question is, why do you even take that case? every judge at every court has decided against them on this issue. So the racists, if you want to know how racist the so-called MAGA 6 are, including the consensual manservant, the black-faced white nationalist Clarence Thomas here, they took the case. So in other words, they should have followed every district court judge, every appeals court judge, and said, this is absurd. But no, in taking the case, they elevated it to the status of a question to even be asked and seriously contemplated. They don't have any law, any case law that's on their side. They literally reached up into their collective racist rectum and pulled out feces, legal feces, a couple of law review articles, some odd off interpretations, cherry-picked misinterpretations of everything from the legislative record over the debate of the 14th Amendment to previous constructions of the so-called English common law. Ketanji Brown Jackson kept bringing that case up, that point up. Not case, it's no case law, it's common law, English common law. But they don't care. The fact that he was sitting there arguing, I don't know, I don't know. Of course, it's asked him, so are Native American citizens? Well, there's statute. Of course, he's like, yeah, I understand the statute. By the way, that's the 1924 statute, federal law, which extended U.S. citizenship to Native Americans, who are, of course, quasi-sovereign. You understand? So prior to 1924, they're not enshrined in the Constitution as citizens. They're quasi-sovereign. So they're subject to different polity, different jurisdictions. There are several categories that are exceptions to the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. And they include if you're born as a child under an occupying army flag, the flag of an occupying army, that came up. You're not a citizen of the United States. It would be like if Germany or whoever had invaded the United States and took control, and then the children born to the Germans under there are under the flag of an occupying army. So no, they're not citizens. If you are under the flag of a foreign embassy, because, technically when you go into the embassy of Botswana or South Africa or England or France or Germany or Brazil or Argentina, Costa Rica, you go into that embassy, you're supposed to be on their territory. So the children of ambassadors, they're born here, they're not citizens. Now, and then the other category is the tribal flag, the sovereign flag, the quasi-sovereign flag. Quasi-sovereignty is a little squishy, but yeah, the sovereign flag of indigenous people. So that would be the three exceptions, except that in 1924, indigenous people were extended the protection, nominally speaking, legally speaking, of citizenship in the United States of America. So when McConnell Gorsuch, and I call him McConnell Gorsuch because that's the stolen seat that the crypt keeper, is he still alive? Anyway, I suppose he is somewhere. Keep falling and freezing. By the way, Kentucky, everybody in Kentucky, check your voter registration. Make sure you're registered. Get out there and early vote. Bank that vote, because young Dan Cameron, who reinforced the murder of Breonna Taylor by making sure that her killers did not receive the heat from the Attorney General's office in Kentucky. Young Dan Cameron, another blackface servant of white supremacy, is running for Senate. So make sure you break his political back. What you see is McConnell stole that seat, and that's what seat Neil Gorsuch sits in. So when McConnell Gorsuch asked Sauer, were Native Americans citizens, and Sauer tried to answer quick with, well, the statute. And then he was like, nah, I'm not talking about the statute. I'm talking about prior to the statute, prior to the 14th Amendment. And he was like, I think so. I'm not, yeah. People clown him for saying he thought so, but he was getting at an issue that we'll come to in a minute, which is the issue of what does your status in the country mean when you're born here? So, it's Easter weekend. And this is a time in the Northern Hemisphere where we talk about the return of the sun and the tilting of the axis of the sun. And we're into that season now. It's a good time for people like Gino Oriema to be reminded that you are not the Lord and Master. And for people like Don Staley to do the reminding and to keep it completely classy. It's funny when racists and get superheated, and then when they have no other place to go, whether it be John Sauer arguing before the United States Supreme Court this week or Gino Oriema having taken that ass whipping there in the Final Four. It's funny how when they have no place to go, they just go to the lie. They just make it up. She didn't shake my hand. We got video of her shaking your hand. My player's ripped. The jersey got ripped. Then the girl herself said, I went up and in frustration, I pulled on my jersey. It ripped. It don't matter. Gino said, I don't care. I don't care, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter reality. If I say it enough, and then of course the commercial news, entertainment, mass media, Oriema and Staley got into it. No, Staley didn't get into nothing. This fool come here talking sideways. And it hadn't been nobody between them, we might be talking about University of Connecticut women's basketball got beat, and then the coach got beat. But at any rate, we're in springtime. So, it's time when people start feeling froggy up in the Northern Hemisphere. The sap is flowing and the flowers is blooming and all that. And of course, we are in the corridor of, we look at this in our Africana Studies rendering, a brother who was out there, a community organizer, a man who had the trust of a handful of people, and a man whom a lot of the people in his community were kind of scared of, because he was out here talking reckless, talking about everybody should eat and everybody should have a place to stay, and you should, I know we're under the government, but the government don't control eternity. Where you going to spend eternity? Well, that guy, was infiltrated by some of the people closest to him, and had a guy working for the counterintelligence program who was, got a bag and sold him out. And so we're in the corridor between when the government tried him on some trumped up charges and gave him the death penalty and hung him, and the day when they go to the tomb and the body's not there. And the lady says, hey, man, I saw the guy. He didn't look like the guy, but I know it was the guy. And then ultimately he appears in the sky and says, I'm going to make sure y'all straight. And guess what? We're in that season. I'm no minister. I'm not even trying to play one on our weekly conversations. So Reverend Wright, Reverend Wingard, all the people here who are ministers, y'all got that. I know you do much more potent renderings to it, but I thought that, for those who want to review the conversations we've had over the origins of oh yeah, absolutely. I remember that's where I got the we want to review our conversations on Easter. If you go back to in class several years ago, this was April 16th, 2022, the day after Emancipation Day here in DC. That was a Saturday when we did session 110. So if you all go, those of you on the YouTube side, go find it. And those of you on the Knarrative side, all those things are in one place. We talked about that weekend on Easter and Jack Roosevelt Robinson, because it was near opening day. And the second week in April usually contains Jackie Robinson Day, where every player in Major League Baseball in the United States of America wear Jack Roosevelt Robinson's number 42. The last player to wear it regularly, of course, Mariano Rivera, the African Central American, is retired. And so nobody wears 42 in the major leagues now, the U.S. major leagues. And so everybody will have that on next week. Well, no, almost next week, week after next. I think it's the 15th. So we talked about Easter extensively in that session. So I encourage folk to go to session 110. And the following week and in class 111, we talked about, the title of that week's session was Double Down on Blackness. Double Down on Blackness and a Celebration of Your Legacy. That was the title. Double Down on Blackness and a Celebration of Your Legacy. And we talked about the plot to kill Martin Luther King. We went through a lot of the literature, a lot of the books on the subject, Claude Pepper's book, The Great Dick Gregory with Mark Lane, his book, and so many other things that have been written and discussed over the years, the testimony of those who are eyewitnesses, whether it be Ralph Abernathy and others, Andrew Young. So if you go to session 111, you will see that. And of course, today, April the 4th, 1968, this is the day that marks the assassination of Martin King. That's why I've got my Actively Black, shout out to Lenny Smith, and I've got my King on today, just remembering the brother, the sacrifice that he made for us. And the convergence of Easter, the Easter weekend, And the date, as you all, everybody, we're here watching it. We're here participating together. I got my feed up over here. Don't worry. Yeah, ADOS does have some of that. We're going to talk about the descendants of slaves and fold it into the birthright citizenship conversation in a minute. But I'm just talking to somebody actually in the YouTube side, and folks that are joining on the narrative side. It's good to see. Pause to honor the depth of this holy season. Yes, right, Deborah. A time that for many means sacrifice. Dr. King made the sacrifice. I think Derek Bell, the great legal scholar, the good brother, the elder, might say with his gentle voice that it was an involuntary sacrifice, but it was a sacrifice nonetheless. It wasn't voluntary like Jesus Christ, whether you believe he walked the earth or you're using him as a metaphor for a larger principle. I think the question of Jesus Christ is also a question of citizenship. And that's why this week we're talking about the question of whether or not we're citizens or subjects. What does it mean to be certain of something in an age of distraction? Let me pause here at the onset and again express my love and gratitude for everyone between our Saturdays, those 6 days that intervene. I can't count the number of people who I get a chance to be in community with, just everywhere. It doesn't matter whether I'm in a classroom or walking down the street or in the library or in a museum or in a store getting something or a bookstore or whatever. The number of people who express love and gratitude for the community that we are in, this community of conversation. So for those at a little after 8 in the morning on the East Coast of the United States of America, who might be doing the early shift or coming home from work or setting out your tools for another day of making people beautiful through their hair and all of that, for those of you who will switch this on a little bit later after we go live at the barbershops and the beauty parlors, for those who will listen, wherever you listen, I want to tell you thank you. And I want to tell you what I tell each and every one of you individually when we get a chance to talk. I will always, until I'm not able to do this anymore, work to earn that investment, work to be a good steward of a platform that has been created to advance the work that those who have come before us have done. And I want to take this moment to especially lift the name of a recent ancestor who made transition since we were talking with each other last, the great Bob Law, because I'm sitting here because Bob Law poured into me. Bob Law, and I got a chance to tell Bob Law that many, many, many years ago, about 30 years ago now, a little bit over. Over 30 years, closer to 40 now. I'm sitting here because not just Bob Law, of course, but when I was a second-year law student at Ohio State, and I spent the summer of 1989 in New York City working at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And shout out to the sister who called Sirius XM this week in Urban View Mornings and reminded me that she and her age mates were little girls and boys, and their grandmother, cousins, their grandmother worked at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And in the summer of 1989, she says, I remember y'all, the law clerks who came. And she asked me, do I remember them? I said, yeah, I remember y'all, of course. Because the elders who worked in the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, some of those elders, some of those Black women went back to the days of Thurgood Marshall. And I will never forget the summer of 1989. Working in the law library, doing research. George Kendall was the guy I was assigned to most, a death row lawyer, a lawyer who was working to use the Eighth Amendment to prevent cruel and unusual punishment. I would come in his office. Sometimes he would be on the phone with the clients. These are appellate lawyers, top-rate lawyers, working for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, pushing to use the Eighth Amendment to stop the state from killing people. Sherilyn Eiffel was a young attorney at the time working at the NAACP. Legal Defense Fund. There was so many stalwarts there. And the great Julius Chambers was the director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So when the sister called, it brought back memories I hadn't thought about in almost 40 years. And they were little. You know, I'm in the law library. I'm supposed to be doing the joint appendix and supposed to be checking footnotes in the next appellate brief. And I'm doing that. But while I'm doing that, I'm reading a law review article that had been recently published a year or two before that by a young scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw. These are the early days of critical race theory. And, but I mention all that to say that after a long day at work, I would leave Lower Manhattan, 99 Hudson Street, and take the train, World Trade Center, and head over to Jersey City, where I was staying there on the waterfront. This before Jersey City had the real estate violence that has turned it into something else. But this is when it was hood Jersey City, which is, you know, you navigate the hood, governance formations. And I would go home ultimately in the evenings and work. And then I would lay down, take a nap, but I would wake up late and listen to Bob Law, Night Talk. Bob Law would come on. He would say, you know, we got to talk about consciousness. Consciousness is as important as Francis Cress Welsing teaches us. You know, when you think about racism, I'm like, man, who is this guy, Bob Law? and I got my notebook, my spiral notebook. I would buy spiral notebooks and write all of them. I got those notebooks. They're all, you know, either in storage, a couple of them here. I'm just taking notes. Ain't got nothing to do with the law, nothing to do with why I came here. But Bob Law, I just discovered him one night. It was WWRL. I don't know if you remember, but yeah, I'm listening, writing down the names of books. When I left, and then of course on the weekends I would go up to First World with Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and Mama Kefa Neptis and Baba Bill Jones, the First World Alliance, 145th and Convent in Harlem, and go to the study group, go to the public meetings. And the study group, the lead study group in New York with African Echoes in Newark, that together and with the other study groups around were anchors of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. The ASCAC conference is coming up here in DC in a couple of weeks. Shout out to Dr. Courtney Robinson, who's going to be hosting us at Theodore Roosevelt High School. But I'm raising all this to say that was a summer of transformation for me. It was a summer, of course, of Fight to Power, Public Enemy, and it was the summer of Do the Right Thing, which I saw there in Manhattan as it opened, the opening weekend. Valethia Watkins and she was on her way to Oxford for the summer to study, but she stopped in New York and spent a couple of days. And so we went to see Do the Right Thing. I'm sure Valethia remembers that. But all of that was transformation. And Bob Law was at the center of that transformation. So as he has joined the ancestors, we ring the bell for Bob Law. Bob Law. I saw Bob Law. In fact, the first time I met him was maybe a year after that. He came to Columbus because another recent ancestor who made transition last month, the great Akbar Muhammad, had his book fair. He had brought all the books from Akbar's Books and Things, and he had come, and Bob Law was the keynote speaker there in Columbus, Ohio, for the book fair that they had. And I got a chance to sit and talk with the big man for a little while before the thing got underway, and to tell him how much he had meant to me. I was a graduate student. I was a law student. I ain't had no money, but all the money I had, I spent on books. So, I mean, it was, in some ways, some things never change. But Bob Law was very important in that. And so that consciousness moment, that transformation of consciousness is very important. And to think about that in this moment and think about those ancestors in this Easter moment is to remind us that springtime is a time of renewal, and that the metaphor of Easter, whether you think Christ walked the earth or you just use it as a metaphor, use him as a metaphor, it is a symbol of belonging. It's a symbol of investment. It's a symbol of certainty. And when you belong to a community, when you belong to a governance formation, when we belong to each other, there are certain expectations that come with that. And when we are in a space where we are not in an ideal condition as a group, not individuals, but as a group, then it is incumbent upon us, if we belong, we have the certainty of belonging. It is incumbent upon us to engage in some form of sacrifice. Some form of sacrifice, ritual or otherwise, that will enable all of us to be in a better space. And we saw that with Martin King. We saw that with the life and work of a Bob Law. We saw it with a John Henry Clark, a Kepha Neptis. We saw it with Jesus Christ. And so the metaphor of Easter is very powerful. Jesus had citizenship, not in the Roman Empire. He was subject to the jurisdiction of the Roman Empire, even as he was not a citizen. We're going to come back to Amy Coney Barrett, y'all. You know, if you missed that at the beginning, she's talking about that, but we'll come back to that in a minute, to this feckless John Sauer. I don't. Yeah, okay. As if we don't see the fact that you already had the victory by bringing this up in the first place, and now we talking about it. So you're a little step closer to your fantasy, but your fantasy is going to run against our reality, and you're going to break against that reality. But Jesus was a citizen. He was a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, I suppose, of God's kingdom. It, reminds me every time in the Easter season, I'm reminded of a book I read a long time ago by Jack Miles. Jack Miles's book was Christ, A Crisis in the Mind of God. And it's a very interesting thesis that he engages in. Jack Miles's book, Christ, A Crisis in the Mind of God. He's a religious scholar. He theorizes. This is his theory. Take it or leave it, but it's provocative. And for the purposes of us, these few minutes we spend together on Saturdays, I think it's interesting. And then for the rest of the week, and thanks to everybody who continues to like, to share, to subscribe. If you're on the YouTube side, who continues to renew their subscriptions and come into Nubia and Knarrative and Nubia, who come in not to make that the only place you are, but to use that as a place where we convene, find community, find expectations, and then go into the world and go into all the other spaces that we are citizens of. I'm going to use that word a little bit more fluidly today, since that's the topic of the week, and join other communities. And through that joining, create the larger community. That's our work. That's our work. But, in this book, Christ, A Crisis in the Mind of God, what Jack Miles argues is, he says, what if in the Old Testament, the Christian God is kind of vengeful? He put that fire on you, Sodom and Gomorrah, turn you into a pillar of salt. It's kind of rough. Jack Miles is like, and then he thinks that this Christian God had a crisis of thinking about how it moved through the existence that it had created and was part of. And so that ultimately what that Christian God decides to do is to engage in a moment of sacrifice. And Jesus, or Christ, as he would say, Christ is what Jack Miles would say, Christ shows up on earth as the embodiment of the divinity, working out this question of sacrifice, and working it out not as a vengeful creator, not as a vengeful inhabitor of all reality, but as a sacrificial one. And as a sacrificial one who will transform the nature of divinity. In other words, transform itself, not him or herself, I would say, but itself, transform itself into a even improved version of itself. That tracks very nicely with Africana ways of knowing. Continental African, Caribbean, Latin American, North American, whatever you want to talk about, Africana ways of knowing. As the Yoruba would say in Ifa, the purpose of existence is to work on one's character. So even God working on God's character. It's fascinating to me. So anyway, I thought about that in this Easter season because, in many ways, Jesus Christ is a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And he had citizenship in the kingdom of heaven. Well, what does that mean? That means there's a certainty of his permanent status. There's no way for Jesus not to exist. Now, I know I'm straying into the area the theologians are expert on, so I know y'all, let's talk about it Monday night. I'm just thinking theoretically, if you are God, if you're divinity, then you know that you're never going to not exist. You're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And that allows you to engage in an investment and an expansion of the citizenship to those that have been created out of this bounty of eternal power. So when Christ is on that cross, and we took a moment yesterday to play part of the live version of James Cleveland in the Gospel Music Workshop of America, when they are singing, he would not come down from the cross just to save himself. He decided to die. He decided. You know, some of y'all Christians, y'all know about that. If he was an usher like I was, you know, that's the song to run you up out of there. Oh, Easter weekend? Yeah, you sing it on the Easter Sunday. Some of y'all been in that church, like I've been in that church. Oh, they run you out. My mom, first one, start breaking out. If he had come down from the cross, a world of lost sinners wouldn't be long. And James Cleveland telling the story. Christ could have come down. He said, if he wanted to, he could have called 10,000 angels. And everybody's like, yeah, but he wouldn't come down. He would not. But of course, those of you who were somewhere at somebody's church last night, I think that's how they do it, ain't it, Reverend Wright? I'm not sure. The 7 last words of Christ, which you've preached many times, you know, they preached that, I think, on Good Friday, so-called Good Friday on Friday night, right? The 7 last words, the day that Christ was crucified. So, you know, Christ says, you know, Father, into thy hands I commend. No, that's not the wrong one. Into thy hands I commend my spirit. That's 7, right? 7 last words. But y'all correct me if I'm wrong. Now, let me look in here and make sure y'all do it now. But before that, there's a crisis. There's a moment when he's like, Father, hast thou forsaken me? So Miles is like, he talking to himself. That's doubt. Because if you're the embodiment of Christ, you know, I ain't gonna get into the, look, I'm not a theologian, I'm not gonna get into a theological debate, I'm not gonna talk about the ecumenical councils and the nature of the divinity and the Trinity and all. No, I'm just saying, in a moment, Miles is like, maybe he talking to himself, Father, hast thou forsaken me? In other words, did I do the right thing? But that moment of uncertainty is reinforced by the fact, no, I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. I have a certainty, which allows this investment, this sacrifice, to be sure to expand the citizenship by inviting you into the kingdom of heaven. Then I'm going to leave. I go to prepare a place for you. So when y'all, those of you Christian, when you get to heaven, are you an immigrant? You know what I mean? You got citizenship up there, right? Because it was extended to you through an act of sacrifice by a permanent citizen who is not a naturalized citizen of heaven. Perhaps that would be what we would be if we go to heaven. No, but a birthright citizen. Uh-oh. A birthright citizen. I got something for you, John Sauer. Or not. Or not. You and your jackleg friend, Ty Blanche, who replaced Blondie. Yeah, y'all know what white, particularly white male misogynists and racists do. When they get in trouble, they're gonna blame the women. He done promoted Ice Barbie to the shield of the Americas. He just dumped Lawyer Barbie. Hey, Spy Barbie, Tulsi, you better look out, because he's getting rid of these women. And who is he putting in? His old raffish friends, his old jackleg lawyers. The deputy attorney general is now the interim attorney general. Ty Blanche lost everything he touched. That's the one that Tish James people dusted off. Like Gino would have got dusted off yesterday by Don Staley. Like his team did get dusted off by them young girls running up down the court for the University of South Carolina doing their thing. But Ty Blanche get dusted off every time he go in court. Ty Blanche, the one, remember they sent to Ghislaine Maxwell to kiki with her and then get her transferred to the not really prison. That was Ty Blanche. He the attorney general now. In Trump's mind, he done upgraded. He got rid of that girl who was so loyal. But you can't be loyal enough because you've never been a citizen of the Trump crime family, Pam Bondi. You're gone. You don't have the certainty. The reports are you begged for your job. But you were never a citizen. You never had the certainty of belonging. And so because you didn't have the certainty of belonging, even all of your behavior really was a sacrifice. You played yourself. As Ice-T or maybe DJ Khaled, who understands Palestinian but won't say a mumbling word about it, even as they would say, congratulations, you played yourself. But, you know, with them all being gone in this phallocentric girl purge that they will continue replacing by men's men like Mark Wayne Mullen, or lackeys like Todd Blanche, and maybe Lee Zeldin will be the new attorney general. It doesn't matter. Globally, we see what happens when these people who think that they control stuff run up against other people who are equally matched or even more powerful. Just like Gino Auriemma's University of Connecticut women's basketball team is just very good. It's not commentary at all about the players any more than it's a commentary on those well-meaning people who join the military. I'm not talking about the racists. I'm sure some are sprinkled around there too, but I'm not talking about the racists. I'm not talking about the people in the military who are following behind prayer meeting at the Pentagon having Runt Rooster, Pistol Pete, Hexeth, as Gerald Horn calls him. I'm talking about those people who just joined because they want the GI Bill, they want the benefits, they want to get a skill, they want to get in and out. So just like that, the people, the athletes on these teams, I'm not talking about them, but, just like Gino, the United States is finding out that when you are no longer able to, in Gino Ariema's case, play in a weak conference where you can roll over everybody and play a few marquee games where you can test the metal, but then you run up against a team that's in a war league, the slave economic concern, where everybody got a team stocked with folks whose people came off the plantation, like the SEC. Now you got to play some people who used to fighting, who used to putting their elbow in your chest, who's used to blocking you out. You fell back and looking for the referee. Yeah. And then you get that tight ass defense. Go ahead, Raven Johnson. You guarded them all, sis. That young girl out of Westlake High School in Atlanta, she's not playing with you. And Gino took an L. Well, who is the University of South Carolina women's basketball team of the world? Right now, it's looking like Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is not closed, friends. It's closed to your master and your master's frenemies or ex-friends. I don't know. Actually, April the 4th, 1949, 48 or 49, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was founded, NATO. May not mean much longer because now NATO is, even the Brits who ain't in NATO are withholding intelligence from the United States. We don't trust you, because you just gave it to Vladimir Putin, or what I mean, and the rest of the, Macron is on the front page of all the newspapers yesterday and today talking about we can't trust y'all. Oh, thank you. 49. Very good. 1949. Thanks, Prof. And so what I'm saying is that perhaps it's not a perfect metaphor, but it's close enough for this morning, this Easter weekend. Perhaps the University of Connecticut basketball team is the United States, the women's basketball team is the United States of America, and perhaps the University of South Carolina women's basketball team at this moment in time, we don't know if they're going to win the championship or not. We'll find out tomorrow, Easter Sunday. Perhaps that is Iran, who is keeping the Strait of Hormuz open for its friends, taxing those who could go either way, bombing the mess out of the Gulf states, which is causing the Gulf states, the UAE and Qatar, and, even the Saudis with Mohammed bin Salman, who had paid off Jared Kushner and paid off Donald Trump, and Qatar gave him a plane. And in exchange, you're supposed to be able to protect us. You got all your military bases over here. We sell our oil and then we get the money in dollars and give it to you and your banks, but you can't protect us. So now we got to come back and say, hey man, the rent's due. What the hell's going on? Yeah, the United States of America is now playing an SEC team. And if you don't think Iran had this strategy years ago, you're not paying attention. Bibi, the international killer, been trying to get the United States in this war forever because Bibi knows he has no play. He has no play. Israel and drug the United States into a war it can't win, and they are with whatever munitions they have, whatever great power forward they have, and point guard and two guard they can shoot. They are now playing a team that they are not as good as, and that team is not backing up. Other countries are finding Achilles heels in the United States. They're working around them. Never forget that Iran joined the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and China and Russia share a border. And you want to know why that almost 750,000 barrels of oil made it to Cuba this week on that Russian tanker? If you want to know why, understand the United States ain't got the kind of muscle to stop it anymore. And the guy who's the president of the United States has a guy in Moscow who every time he calls him, he's like, whatever you want. Why? Because whatever Vladimir Putin got on Donald Trump is probably half as good as whatever is in them 3 million files that Pam Blondie would not release, which is one of the reasons that Bozo got rid of her and put his his attorney in to try to protect him. And I'm saying, dude, that was a downgrade because your attorney loses every time he goes to court. We're probably one step closer to seeing the Epstein files. But whatever Putin got on Trump, That ship is now in Matanzas, in the port in Cuba, and that oil being offloaded with everything else, and they've got a lifeline. Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico is like, we have the right as a sovereign nation to send help to the Cubans and also sell stuff to the Cuban commercial enterprises. All that is entangled. Bozo, your team looking like UConn from his basketball team. And of course, what happens is you now want to pick a fight with their head coach. Bozo out here ranting and raving. Y'all saw him on Tuesday night or whenever that night was. He delivered that rant, that verbal version of his 4 a.m. Truth Social posts. This is what happens when you run up against somebody and they're scared of you. And so I'm talking about that in the context of what we're talking about today in terms of citizenship. And we're going to turn in a moment now to this case. Because metaphorically, citizenship is about belonging. It's about a certainty that comes with belonging. And through that certainty, it's about an investment in the continued existence of the thing you belong to. And the reason we played Amy Coney Barrett, sometimes known as the Handmaid, the reason we play Amy Coney Barrett at the beginning of our conversation today is because Coney Barrett asked the Solicitor General of the United States, the Raggedy Bower, a question about those who were trafficked into the United States that was really about a broader principle for her. But for us, I think we can use as a point of entry to discuss what it means to be a member of a community with a certainty that you will be treated with respect and dignity and equality. What that certainty then grounds in terms of your capacity to invest your efforts into that. All of that can be addressed, or at least thought about in the context of a concept, citizenship, which I reject generally, because I think that every human being should have equal guarantees of protection and health as a floor. Whatever else happens in their lives through their own initiative, you should have some basic things you can have, a basic certainty of when you come out of your mother's womb. But which I absolutely understand as a metaphor for those things within the framework of what we call now countries. For the last several centuries, nations or nation states, really states. Nations, the United States is not a nation. We talked about that over and over again. We've talked about it. We talked about it again last week when your master told you that they vote no on the resolution from the UN. He said, but I live here too. Yeah, you're only one nation in here. Right now, the white nation has the drop on you, so we vote no. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this in this context. We talk about Jesus for a minute, and it reminds me back in 2013, January 2013, I gave a talk, which some of y'all heard me mention before, but it's new people every week. Again, I'm just, man. In fact, let me just pause here and embrace and acknowledge and reinforce the love for our brother Michael Harriet, Sahi, and Tiffany Cross this week. Tiffany's got a new book coming out. We're going to talk about that a lot when it comes out. Love Me is the name of it. It's about Black women. It's a powerful book. I read the book in its advanced stages, and as she was writing, you reading passages of it, and she and Mike were together talking about the book, and they invited me down. So we were talking about that. He filmed it for his platform, Contraband Camp. Shout out to Michael Harriet. Again, Knarrative and Nubian, he's been a day one, as you know better than I do, Prof, having had conversations with him, an investor by way of subscriptions, giving away subscriptions to Knarrative for folk. And of course, this is a beautiful place for us to convene and think and work together. And then out of that, we contribute to the larger community, the larger polity, the universe of citizens, And so shout out to Mike, spent some time with him. And then he came to Howard. They had a panel on reporting while Black. He, Jason Johnson, several other folks were on that panel. Karen Atia and others. This was when was it? I'm trying to remember. Thursday night, because I was getting ready to go do Rolling, and so I just went over there to say hello, dap them up and everything. And I went on to post up and did Rolling Thursday night. But I'm mentioning it because on the way there, and then while I was there, I met so many people who are part of our communities, part of Nubia, or you come in on the YouTube side on Saturdays and they're like, thank you, thank Karen, thank everyone involved. And I say, hey, I'm gonna work every day to earn that. In fact, I was walking out, an elder was like, you must be getting ready to go do Rolling. I said, yes, sir. I got to go. He said, man, y'all keep on doing what y'all doing. I said, brother, I appreciate that, Baba. This is what we do in our life. It's no sacrifice. It's an honor because I am a member of this community, which means that comes with a certain certainty. And so, yeah, back in January 2013, I went down to the National Archives. By the way, the Emancipation Proclamation is on permanent display now. I thought it was on temporary display. And then Lamont was reading something yesterday on the air, said it was on permanent display. So if you get a chance to go to the National Archives, go see the Emancipation Proclamation. I know exactly where it is, because if it's permanent display, that means it's under the rotunda where the Constitution is, Bill of Rights, and you can see it because it got certain lighting and the cases are treated in a way so it can stay on permanent display. So when you go see it, just remember that on the 150th anniversary of that executive order, which unlike most of what Bozo has signed was constitutional because it was actually during wartime, which enhanced its constitutionality. To this day, though, they be arguing about Lincoln and habeas corpus and this kind of thing, which is a good argument to have because, again, as if Iran keeps this up, they're going to declare wartime emergency. They will shift to war, and they'll try to suspend the election. Not going to happen. Check your voter registration. I said they'll try, just like Bozo tried to sign he signed an executive order this week saying that all mail-in voting in the United States is suspended. Yeah, you don't have the constitutional ability to do that, Bozo. Sign an executive order that can actually be implemented, that's constitutional, because that one, the lawyers were in court while he was signing it. That's not going to fly. But the Emancipation Proclamation, which was signed 150 years ago in 1863, went into effect 150 years ago, January 1863. That's when I gave the talk that I gave at the National Archives in celebration and commemoration of that 150th anniversary. And here we are 10, 11, 12, 13 years after that. Wow, it's been 13 years since I gave that talk. The name of the talk was Abraham Lincoln, American Jesus. Because I said, in the myth making of the United States, if George Washington is the father, Abraham Lincoln is the son, because he made the ultimate sacrifice. Having his citizenship secured, that certainty, to use the metaphor I'm using today, Abraham Lincoln, assured of his membership, made the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate investment, his life. Kind of an involuntary sacrifice. He didn't know John Wilkes Booth was going to blow his brain out. But in that trilogy, if you're going to talk about Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, the Holy Ghost, in my metaphor, in that January 2013 talk, was Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King will be the Holy Ghost. Why? Because that's the animating force behind all of it. And if this country is going to be something other than what it has been to this date, a criminal enterprise, a settler state where you try to flatten everybody into your narrow-ass white definition, you're going to have to open up. You see? And when this man, Martin King, traveled the country, kept being consistent in what he had to say, and in the commingling, the same spirit that would animate anybody who makes the ultimate sacrifice, when he could have been a college professor, when he could have been a theologian and sat at his father's pulpit as co-pastor and then taken over as pastor and been an incredible voice for change. No, he was in the street. He would not come down from the cross just to save himself in a Jesus representation. But I said Abraham Lincoln was American Jesus in that talk. And so I said, yeah, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. George Washington, not my dad, but you claim he's yours. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, y'all love him so much, let him be Jesus. But then you got to make Martin King the Holy Ghost. Why? Because ultimately that's an expansive rendering that's going to force you to give up the narrow renderings that you have had. And I bring that up today, Easter weekend, to talk about the fact that if you live in a community that you are certain you're a part of, well, you're going to have to invest it with the certainty that comes with belonging. Jesus investing in humanity because of the certainty of his relationship with God, which he was the embodiment of, if you read Jack Miles and agree with that. Yet understand that birthright citizenship is allegedly some form of similar expectation. It's interesting. There was an article in the New York Times this week by Padma Lakshmi. I got it here. Let me see. It's called The Decision That Would Create a Permanent American Underclass. It's talking about the birthright citizenship case. Since for the past several years, in fact, let me just pull it up here on the Let me see if I can find it quickly. Here it is. All right. He says, she says rather, Padma Lakshmi says, for the past several years, my work has taken me across the nation, into towns, into cities, she says, and community centers, where generations of indigenous, Black, and immigrant Americans share their family recipes with me. She says, I have been warmly given a front row seat to learn about the cooking that shapes American cuisine and culture. She says, I encountered not a single story of America, but many, evolving as newcomers to our country inherited the practices of those who came before, she says, and brought new ones to add to the national treasure. Underpinning so many of these meals and immigrant stories, including my own family's, was a centuries-old tradition that children born here are Americans. There's the certainty that's supposed to come. That guarantee is called birthright citizenship, and it's been enshrined in our Constitution since 1868. Birthright citizenship provides certainty. Now, I want to pause here to say that in a minute, we're going to talk about this case, and I'm going to introduce something that we heard introduced by Amy Coney Barrett, except she wasn't using it for that purpose, but I am, to introduce this assertion. This is an assertion I've always made, and I don't see anybody who can refute it if they're being honest. The American Negro not only has never had any certainty in terms of being here, but the only reason we've ever wanted any certainty is to be left alone. Ain't nobody crying like hell over no flag. George Washington was a human trafficker, as was Thomas Jefferson, as was James Madison, James Monroe. Most of these people in that first dozen or so held us captive. And most of the people who came after it ain't really want to do too much more about it. And in Lincoln's case, he wanted to do a lot about it because he wanted to preserve the Union. Don't get cute with me. Chapter and verse drug for filth, the United States of America. We were trafficked. And to the descendants of slaves and the foundational Black Americans and the B1s and all this. Let me ask you a question. The question I always ask, did not your ancestors have ancestors? Why are you so disrespectful to every ancestor in eternity, except the ones that have been in this criminal enterprise for the last 15 minutes of world history? I'll tell you why, because it's a trauma that has been engendered with you. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to help you. So anyway, she goes on to say in this article, Padma Lakshmi, she says, I've been going around picking up these recipes and people are showing me this stuff, and underpinning all this stuff is the idea that the people who are born here are citizens. She says, birthright citizenship provides certainty. So I'm taking this word from her, certainty. And that certainty is what propels people to invest in their communities. I'm taking that from her too this week. They always show your work. That certainty. And she says that certainty propels people to invest in their communities, to innovate, and ultimately to create traditions that become unmistakably American. Here's where I depart. Because what I would say is that this is not a nation. Common heritage, common language, common culture, this trash can language of English, we've done the best we could. Shout out to people like Paul Dunbar and Toni Morrison. We've done the best we could. Shout out to people like L. Scott Heron, whose birthday was this week. We've done the best we could with the language, but let's be crystal clear about it. The way that we are able to transform this language doesn't come from the English language, comes from the Africana cultural meaning making of our languages, the Africana ways of knowing underneath our languages, and the movement and memory that let us pass it on from generation to generation to generation. It does not come from Europe. It comes from the continent. Did not your ancestors have ancestors? ADOS. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So that's where I would part company with her. It doesn't make us quintessentially American. It makes us Africans who have Africanized every space we have been in. She goes on to write and say, on Wednesday, the Supreme Court will hear a case, heard a case now, challenging President Trump's executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship. At stake is more than a legal case. Birthright citizenship gets at the heart of American values and culture. Ain't no American values. I'm sorry. We'll get to it. All right, so let's continue. She's talking about this, and I want to contrast that discussion of birthright citizenship and bringing your culture into a space to add to the project once you've been guaranteed a certain relationship to the polity, which is for me absolutely the heart of the definition of Black citizenship in the United States, also indigenous citizenship in the United States, also non-white immigrant citizenship in the United States. The heart of it is the idea that whatever you're bringing and adding to this social structure, you're doing it once you've been guaranteed the certainty of a certain relationship to the polity. I think citizenship in the Western legal framework is the gold standard of humanity. If you're not a citizen, all of a sudden you've been demoted from the gold standard to something less. That to me is a crime. That's why last week when the president of Ghana, John Mahama, got up and said that I want slavery on behalf of all the Africans of the world, you too, ADOS FBA, I know you're mad, but that's cool. In your trauma, we'll never reject you because you are members of our community. Muhammad says this is a crime against humanity, meaning its crime transcends whatever the law was at any moment. And everybody who voted agreed except the Europeans, whether they be the original European countries or their former colonies like Argentina, the United States, or their most recent colony, Israel. And the excuse they gave was, well, it wasn't the law at the time. Crimes against humanity transcend whatever the law was at the time, as does the notion that you're a human being. Now let us turn ourselves in our Africana Studies framework to the direct social structure conversation of this case. The birthright citizenship oral arguments that we heard at the Supreme Court of the United States, and whether you can follow those arguments or not, I recommend, particularly if you're a high school teacher or if you're just sitting around the after school program, everybody talking about freedom schools now, freedom schools now, freedom schools now. I got a chance to see my sister, my road dog, ride or die, Erica Sequoia, this week. She and her family live in Kenya, but she's in the States here for a while. And so we got a chance to sit and talk. Erica was the first architect of Philadelphia Freedom Schools in its iteration that started in 1999. We recruited her from her work, among other places, at the Friends Neighborhood Guild in Philly and the Children's Defense Fund, where she was the lead trainer of the Ella Breaker trainers, and living in Philly at the time. And she and I have been through the things, getting hundreds of students to Shaw University, where we did freedom school training for our high school and college students, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, every way you can think of. So Sister Dr. Kelly, Erica was in town, Kelly Sparrow Mickens, who's a member of the Nubia Nation, of course, and is here all the time, probably here this morning, got a chance to sit with Erica yesterday. We were talking about freedom schools, and people talking about, now we're going to start a freedom school. Now, what does that mean? It's a label, but what does it mean? At the heart of our work was literacy, was reading and writing. That was the non-negotiable. Whatever else we added to it, apprenticeship, moving here, there, but no. At the heart of it was that deep intellectual work with those 3 ground rules: be present, read and write, speak to after, Mekhet, those 3 ground rules. Anything else for us was not freedom school. And our ultimate objective was to drop the word freedom. It should be school. But in the interim, in this social structure we find ourselves in, we will have a space where intellectual work will be centered. I'm here to tell you right now that is not the case damn near anywhere I know. That's why we maintain that standard here. We can't maintain it in all the things that happen, but I tell you now how many toes there are in the world down. I'm going to do it to the day I stop breathing. This is what we're going to do. And so we were talking about that, and thinking about that in the context of what's going on in the country right now. One of the things we talked about was how important it is to have our young people really grapple with language. And she was talking about the young people she works with in Kenya, where she's replicating a lot of the lessons learned over the last 30 plus years of work she's been doing there. And she said they don't have the computers, they don't have even cell phones, things like that. But what they do have is the deep passion for education. So we got a piece of blackboard, a few books. And when I made the call and we all come out, you get 50, 100 students at the library round in circles. And the ones that had done it the longest turn around and help the ones who are just coming in the way we used to do it. She said, this is the magic of it. This is when I know we will win. I said, I agree with you, sis. I would relish coming back into a space where there's nothing electronic. Because that distraction, that cacophony of perpetual noise has driven us to a place where everybody talking, their opinion is as good as everybody else talking. And that's true in the sense of being human beings, but it's not true in terms of what you're specifically talking about. Don't worry, we're going to talk about all of this. I had several conversations over the arc of the last week with my man, Nick Cannon. Oh, don't think I have forgotten or that I haven't heard. But at any rate, so we're talking about that and those distractions that come. And I say, it would be great, saying this to myself, it'd be great if we got some young people together and just listen to the oral arguments of the case, the birthright citizenship case of Trump versus Barbara. Just play it and listen to it. That's why we played a couple of minutes at the beginning of this session today. In talking about it, you might get a chance to understand some of the underlying issues and some of the underlying things, whether you're ever going to be in a law school or not, whether you're ever going to need a lawyer or not. It's language, it's words, and we're all capable of understanding the more knowledge we have about how these things are being used. So let me just enter this for a moment. This birthright citizenship oral argument that we heard this week. Jack Sauer, the Solicitor General, versus the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, Cecilia Wang. The white supremacists who have temporarily captured the federal apparatus versus our common humanity. Shoehorned into a narrow debate over the nature of what it means to be a fully legal citizen, or what it means to be a fully top shelf gold standard human being in the United States versus being kicked out of that and being something a little less than human, which I find offensive as a human being, but understand as a member of a nation state. I want to make that clear distinction because people bandy about the word citizenship and reinforce the idea that some people are better than other people based on where they came out of their mother's womb. I reject that. Those of you who embrace it should probably rethink it conceptually. But let's continue. They're talking about citizenship. Jack Sauer, on behalf of the white supremacists, another of Bozo's personal lawyers, has to take the affirmative on the following issue. Here's the issue. Whether Bozo's executive order that he signed on January the 20th, right down here in Chinatown at the basketball arena, the hockey arena, after he got sworn in and the hillbilly horde came to see him sworn in, and he started signing them worthless ass pieces of paper with that hillbilly parvenu junior varsity Vance standing over there skinning and grinning, where Elon Musk gave the Nazi salute sign twice and isn't man enough to say that's what he was doing. He started signing paper, and one of the papers he signed that day is no Emancipation Proclamation Executive Order. It was Executive Order 14,160, which argues that was it executive? Yeah, whether executive order. So what they're debating is Executive Order 14,160 is what Trump signed, and it basically said that they are now revoking birthright citizenship for the children of illegal immigrants. Immediately, the court cases are filed, and every court up until this MAGA court said it's absurd. It does not comply on its face. When they say on its face in the law, it means the plain language. We ain't even got to talk about it no more. It doesn't comply on its face with the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. And let's just read the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. Let me see, I'll pull it up. I keep a constitution here just for fun. Y'all have seen this many times. I keep this little annotated constitution. Here's the 14th Amendment, Section 1. Proposed June 13th, 1866, ratified July 9th, 1868. It reads as follows, to wit. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Sentence 1. Sentence 2. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, semicolon, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, semicolon, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the laws. What does that say? That means if you're born here, you are a citizen. With those three exceptions I mentioned, unless you're born from somebody who's subject to another flag, meaning they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, whether it be a tribal flag at the time, whether it be the flag of a foreign country at the time, meaning you come here for the ambassador, your people are from the ambassadorial corps or whatever, or if somebody's invaded the United States and that's a foreign country that, runs the place. And the only three exceptions, they are permanent and they can't be expanded on. Now, that's the citizenship. What they also say in the 14th Amendment, that everybody, every person, citizen, non-citizen, if you are a human being, you are you are due equal protection under the law and due process of the law. All persons. It's plain language on its face. So the question that before the court this week, was whether the executive order Bozo signed revoking birthright citizenship for the children of illegal immigrants complies on its face with the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. The answer is no. But let me add one other thing. In 1950, I want to say 2, a statute was passed by the United States Congress, signed into law by the president, which reinforced the 14th Amendment, codified it, put it in the U.S. Code. What does that mean? Okay, there's a 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution that says that the right to vote shall not be abridged. That's the Constitution. Then in 1965, there was a federal law, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which codified the meaning of the constitutional 15th Amendment. So the right to vote is in the 15th Amendment. When people say they're voting to take our rights away, no, they're voting to try to circumscribe or expand the meaning of it, but the meaning of it's in the Constitution. The statute they passed is supposed to extend the protections, or at least reinforce the protections, more clearly explain the protections of the Constitution. In the case of birthright citizenship, that's in the 14th Amendment. And what they passed in the 1950s, 8 is now codified at 8 U.S. Code, Section 1401A. Heard that a lot in the oral arguments. That law codifies the 14th Amendment. Says, yeah, this is what it means. And in that statute, in that Congress passed federal law signed by the President of the United States, that law takes the exact same language of the 14th Amendment. Now watch this. This is why Cecilia Lang, when asked by the court, well, would you rather win on the Constitution or the statute? She says, we'll take either one as a win. You hear little chuckles. She said, but we really do think you need to rule on the constitutional grounds, the 14th Amendment grounds. Why is she saying that? Because if you rule on the statutory grounds, guess what? If the white nationalists can get a majority in the federal legislature, they could narrow, expand, change that language, and then you right back here. No, rule on this one. Why? That's where Kim Wong-Ark was in 1898. We're getting there. We're getting there. In 1898, there was a case involving some woman and man who had come from China. Mind you, there's no Immigration and Naturalization Act. In other words, there are no Congress-passed rules defining citizenship in this way. We're still in the 19th century. So people coming here, the only guidance you have in terms of the children they have is whether or not the child was born here and subject to the jurisdiction of where they are born. And the case in 1898, Kim Wong-Ark, these 2 Chinese people come here, they have a baby, and that baby is said to not be a citizen because your parents are not from here. This is the racism. 1898. The decade before, they had something called the Chinese Exclusion Act. They want to start getting rid of people because these white nationalists, they're going to do what white nationalists do. They've called for reinforcements after the Civil War. What was that? That was come to America, get you some sod, build you a little house on the prairie. We keep going west. And so here come the Germans, here come the Irish, here come, and then later in the 1920s, maybe a generation after Kim Wong-Ark, here come the Italians and the Southern Europeans. Because we need reinforcements. Whiteness, the numbers ain't big enough, and everybody's coming. And the industry is booming. And the American Negro, what about a Because when they come here, we're going to convince them that their best shot at being completely included, not just as a legal citizen, but the investment and the certainty that they're part of the nation as well, the imaginary idea as well, is that they're not you. This is why I say being a citizen is not enough legally. You got to conceptually be a citizen. What they're fighting about is whiteness, because their numbers are pancaking. And guess what? You know why? Because the United States is looking every day more like the rest of the world. The rest of the world is non-white. The world has always been non-white. And as the globe shrinks, I don't care if you're taking a picture of it from the moon. Let's take a picture of the earth. The people walking there, most of them not white. And whiteness is fake anyway. So we continue. Kim Wong-Ark, the Supreme Court says, yeah, he was born here. The question that they also raise in the Kim Wong-Ark case is whether or not they were here permanently, his parents. Because what the racists are arguing is, well, yeah, he was born here, so therefore, yeah, that satisfies the first part of the 14th Amendment. birthright citizenship clause. But the second part says you got to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Okay. Is the baby subject to the jurisdiction of the polity, the jurisdiction of California, the jurisdiction of the United States? The racists don't want to talk about the baby. Well, wait a minute. His parents weren't. What does that mean? His parents, well, we don't know whether they were here permanently. Okay. We don't know whether they were domiciled here. Okay. What does being domiciled mean? And what does that have to do with the baby? So the racist is like, well, domicile means that to be domiciled somewhere means that they intend to stay here permanently. So in the case, the parents of Kim Wong-Art make a strong case and show that they did everything to be domiciled here. To mean, in other words, to say they ain't never leaving. They got a house, jobs, employment. But here's the trick, y'all. None of that was necessary to establish that their baby was a citizen. They just doing that to show that they're going to be good Americans. But none of it is relevant. Now, y'all heard a lot. If you listen to the oral arguments this week, you heard a lot in Trump versus Barbara about this word domicile. That's because Sauer and them are making the same raggedy ass argument that was lost in 1898, that somehow where your parents are from and whether they intend on going back or staying has any relevance to whether or not their baby is subject to the jurisdiction of the place they came out of their mother's womb. The answer to that is always yes. This ain't even a clever sleight of hand. It's bullshit. It's very important to understand. The key phrase is reinforced in the statute, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Where your parents came from is not an issue. But here now, let's make our turn. And you heard a lot back and forth. And in fact, I love this. And this is just, because, lawyers, legal scholars, law students, and people fascinated by the law generally find these discussions to be fascinating because it really is about language. So I thought it was fascinating to hear them go back and forth, whether it be Alito and Thomas, whether it be Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson, whether it be John Roberts, Beer Kavanaugh, about this question of domicile. At one point, it's very interesting because they keep raising this up. Well, if domicile isn't important, how come it's raised in the Kim Wong-Art opinion so many times, like a couple dozen times almost? Well, here's what was fascinating. At one point, Alito, this is the guy who's probably going to be one of the perhaps two who vote to say that Bozo and them can do this. Alito says, well, maybe, they raised it because they put domicile in there so much because they wanted to show that these people worked real hard to show that they were here permanently. And, it doesn't have any legal meaning, really. It just is a demonstration that these people worked hard to be good citizens. The next voice, Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson. She says, I like to agree with Justice Alito on that. I think that's probably what it was. It wasn't a legal interpretation. It was just a reiteration that these people wanted to be good Americans. I said, I'll be damned. Here's Ketanji agreeing with Sam on this very narrow, specific point. And that's the thing that a lot of people who are not lawyers, not legal jurists, don't understand, don't get, because they're listening like it's just debates. But these are also legal questions. Because underneath that is the issue. And the question is, does it matter whether they were domiciled or not? The clear answer to that is no. But what Sauer and them are trying to argue is the answer is yes, but it applies to the parents, not to the children, which brings me to Amy Coney Barrett. By the way, let me put a footnote here. Check your voter registration. Register if you're not voted. Get out there and vote your numbers. The parties don't matter. All the parties are the same. Nah, Chief. Let me tell you why. You get enough people in the federal legislature, particularly U.S. Senate, you flip the Senate and then take the presidency a couple years from now. We're talking about Thomas retiring. He probably will. You want to make sure that he can't get somebody confirmed. Do to them what McConnell did to you. We ain't confirming nobody. It's too close to the election. If you got the number, if you ain't got the number, they're going to stack it. Alito and Thomas may retire the next 2 years. I wouldn't be surprised. Alito was in the hospital a few days ago. They just released the story this morning. I read in the paper talking about how he was there for undisclosed. Hey, man, y'all better be careful. They're going to swip them two boys out. But the one I'm looking at is John Roberts. He getting a little long in the tooth. Plus, he done opened up and messed up his court with that Citizens United thing. And so now he's going to side. He's clear. The first thing he said at the oral arguments was, wait, this argument is kind of, but yeah, say, oh yeah, Robert's going with them. They got 5-4 already. All they need is one more. And Amy Coney Barrett may be the one, or maybe Beer Kavanaugh, maybe McConnell Gorsuch, who was very skeptical, but someone, they're going to lose. At least 6-3, maybe 7-2, maybe 8-1. Clarence Thomas ain't going to give it up. He's going to do whatever his master tell him to do, ain't you? While you waiting on that next payment or that next mobile home. But at any rate, if John Roberts retires and you got a president and a Senate that's amenable to it, how you like the sound of Chief Justice Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson? See, that's how elections work. Roberts retires, the right president can nominate Ketanji Brown Jackson with the right Senate, Senate, she gets confirmed. And this time, 3 years from now, or 5 years from now, or whenever it is from now, you're talking about the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court being Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson. Stop being stupid and stop scrolling social media for your information. Or do. Keep going. I don't care. The point is this. Enough of us need to be serious about this, to think tactically, to think strategically. And for those of you who think Ketanji Brown Jackson ain't no different than the rest of them, you should probably confine your comments to YouTube as well. Because that tells me that you don't have an opinion that should be listened to in the middle of this cacophony. So Amy Coney Barrett, and then we're going to begin to wind this up. She continued to hammer at this question of domicile. The Amy Coney Barrett question we heard at the beginning, which is what she asked about the Africans who were here, what she called slaves. And in quoting an ancient 19th century document, they kept talking about African potentates. I couldn't help but laugh. We ain't talking about these damn African potentates. Anyway, but the Amy Coney Barrett question we played, I thought, asked an important point of entry for this morning. Africans didn't ask or want to be here. Africans didn't ask or want to be here. Africans didn't ask and didn't want to be here. So Coney Barrett asks this raggedy ass John Sauer, well, what about the slaves, as she would call them? They were always trying to escape. The ones who were brought from Africa wanted to go back to where they came from. So clearly they haven't established, by your definition, domicile. Now, what she left out conveniently were that these people are not citizens. They're captives. What she also left out conveniently is that the 13th Amendment, which, quote unquote, freed Africans, did not make them citizens either. When the 13th Amendment was passed, 1865, between 1865 and 1866, them white boys in the South started passing a raft of laws called the Black Codes, because now you're not property anymore, but you ain't citizens either. So we're going to regulate you. You're human beings without a legal status that elevates you to the gold standard. So we're going to start passing laws. You better not spit on the sidewalk. You can't congregate more than 2 of y'all someplace. If you're sleeping out in public, we're going to enslave you. And then you start punishing people by putting them on a chain gang or whipping them. So then the United States Congress, those Republicans who were using the Civil War and its aftermath to impose a different standard on the South, where the Democrats were. These are people Nick was talking about, who started the Klan, Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, who started Ku Klux Klan, also a Democratic elected official. He was right as far as that goes. Now, where he messed up riding around with Amber Rose, and I'm not going to betray the confidence of the private conversations we've had, but I'm letting y'all know right now, we're working on it. So you just keep your eyes peeled. This story ain't over yet. Man spent a lot of time with me over the arc at Howard University and a lot of time since. What I'm not going to do is quit that battlefield. And I told you what I tell everybody that comes to me. I'm going to work to earn this respect. So you don't worry about that. Just keep your ear to the ground, because some things can be amended. Some things can be changed. Some things can't, but we'll see. We will see. But my point is that the Republican Party of that period, which is what now, of course, is the party of white supremacy, because all them people who would have been Democrats in the 1860s are now Republicans. Again, critical piece that was left out of that car ride. Plus, don't get no car with Amber Rose. Anyway, not pertaining to confidence. The point is this. The Republicans then say, oh, hell no, these black codes. So they passed something called the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which establishes, they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 over the veto of the president of the United States. Lincoln had his brains blown out. Now come Andrew Johnson, a racist, North Carolina, buried in Tennessee, vice president of the United States, now the president of the United States. Andrew Johnson says this. Andrew Johnson says, oh yeah, let's let them all back in. And they can have their seats back in the Senate and the House of Representatives. So they licking their chops. The 13th Amendment says they ain't slaves no more, except if they commit a crime. So now we're going to pass all these laws to basically criminalize being black. And once we got our own convictions, we'll return to a form of slavery and we get to come back, which means actually the Civil War, we hate that we lost these hundreds of thousands of people. But here's the good thing about the Civil War in the mind of John C. Calhoun, all these Southerners. The good thing is we used to have a 3/5 compromise when they would count the bodies of black people toward representation in Congress. But the 13th Amendment now just created a quasi status and we can count all of them. So they getting ready to come back to the House of Representatives and come back to the Senate, and they're going to have bigger numbers than ever. And they're going to run a Boston, and the whole country going to be white supremacists if you're going by federal law. And the Republicans in Congress, Thad Sumner and them, Thad Stevens and them, Charles Sumner, oh, hell no. So they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866. They sent it to the president's desk. That white supremacist is like, oh, hell no, he vetoes it. Then they override the veto. That's the power they had. Elections don't count. Pay attention to election law. Pay attention to U.S. history. When they did it, they passed the law and they said that black people should have the right to make and enforce contracts. Any right they have should not be denied by race or color. There's still no voting rights, but now what they're trying to do is create a status where they won't be harmed, but they haven't yet got to the question of citizenship. And the states in the South who have passed these black codes, the first one, Mississippi, second one, South Carolina, Florida, them not far behind. Hey, Pufferfish, the governor of Florida, the white supremacist named Andrew DeSantis. You saw what he did this week. If you can't get that federal SAVE Act passed, we'll pass one in Florida. Mississippi doing the same thing, trying to restrict voting. Why? That's the same move they tried in the 1860s and after the 13th Amendment. We're going to try to create a situation where we can nominally restrict, not nominally, but we're going to largely restrict what it means to be a member of this polity. There will be no certainty. There will be no expectation. There will be no investment. There will be no sacrifice because you're stepping out on ice that we have gotten rid of. We didn't make it thin ice. We've evaporated it. They're going after the fundamental building block of any country, which is belonging. Belonging in a way that gives you equal status to everybody else who belongs. Voting is part of that. Why vote? Because that is your power in a polity where the law establishes a form of a floor and a form of equality. That's what that vote represents, whatever you do with it or don't. Okay? Now, so they pass ultimately the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and then the Reconstruction Act of 1867, 13th Amendment, y'all free except if you commit a crime. In the South, that was 1865. 1866 through 67, black codes. Oh, we got to pass these laws to make them criminals. Then we got them under control. And they count toward our election, which means we're going to have even more senators, more Congress. Congress like, hell no. Civil Rights Act of 1866 to get at the black codes. And they said that's not enough. The following year, 1867, they passed the Reconstruction Act of 1867. And that says that Southern states must vote to ratify the next amendment we teeing up, or they can't come back into the Union. Well, what are they working on? They working on the 14th Amendment. Everybody born here is a citizen. That's what they were debating this week, because these white supremacists, they're not fighting just the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They're not just fighting the Civil Rights Act of 1864, which is codifying the 14th Amendment. They're not just fighting the Fair Housing Act of 1960. They are fighting the Reconstruction Amendments. These white nationalists are trying to roll us back to the pre-Civil War. I'll get to that in a minute. We're going to close in a minute. So they passed the Reconstruction Act, Congress does, of 1867 with enough numbers to override Johnson veto to say, yeah, you got to pass the coming amendment as a condition of you coming back in the Union. Meanwhile, you got them under military occupation at this time as well. But then they passed the 14th Amendment, the one that we're talking about, the Citizenship Amendment, the Equal Protection Amendment, the Due Process Amendment. And then they passed the 15th Amendment. By the way, the Reconstruction Act of 1867 not only required Southern states to ratify the 14th Amendment, it also required them to enact universal male suffrage. So this is before the 15th Amendment. Because they realized all of the parties are the same. Voting don't matter. They realized that the only way you can protect whatever rights you've been able to fight to get, and let's be very clear, all rights are impermanent because it's relied on human beings. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to tell the police that they can't come in your house or search your car, and you should exercise that right. At the same time, you should understand, as we tell students all the time, your first objective is to survive your encounter with these racists. Unless you're willing to give that ultimate sacrifice, God bless you if you are. We know got a lot of freedom fighters out there, but let's be crystal clear. Your mama and them want to see you again, and then let your mama and them come out and fight, right? But the point is this, with you, but the point is this, the vote is as close as you have in a polity where voting is at the center of what it means to be a gold standard citizen, a gold standard member of the polity. That's as close as you get to being able to protect as a polity those rights that you have fought for. So in that Reconstruction Act of 1867, they say extend the franchise to all male citizens. So then they have to pass the 14th Amendment. They passed the 14th Amendment in the United States, and then they come right next in 1870 with the 15th Amendment and say if it's going to be an election, the right to vote should not be and cannot be and will not be denied to anyone on account of race, color, and or previous condition of servitude, at which point the women come, the white women and the black women, like, hold on. You don't say nothing about sex. No, I agree with Valencia Watkins on this and so many legal scholars that say you really didn't need a 19th Amendment if you had interpreted the 15th Amendment to apply to gender as well. But because it wasn't explicitly stated, then you end up with a 19th Amendment. And the white women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, racists, yelling stuff like, don't give the vote to Sambo, those black men, before you give it to your wives and daughters. You have to read Valencia Watkins on that, and she's done some brilliant work on that. And of course, there's a library of books on that question. But now we bring it to close. I agree with Chokwe Lumumba and Amari Obadele and Nkechi Taifa, who y'all heard me mention last week on this question. Between the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, nobody asked black people what they wanted. They never asked us what we wanted. I agree with Baba Amari. I agree with them. We should have had a plebiscite. Ask them Negroes what they want. Do they want to be citizens? Do they want to be left alone? You want to go somewhere else, the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, someplace that may agree to take you. Of course, Africa is being colonized at this point. At that moment, this is right around this, in a decade or so, maybe 20 years or so, they're going to have the Berlin Conference. I mean, no, maybe not Africa right now, but and the people say, well, we ain't never been nowhere else. That don't mean you love America. That just means that you want to be left alone. And so ultimately, we should have had the opportunity to be self-determining. And according to them, of course, when you read Reparations, yes, and Keachie's included the arguments that they made, and I agree with those arguments. Ultimately, there are reparations due, but those reparations stem from the 13th Amendment. They don't need a 14th Amendment for that. But there's time between the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment where you should have polled black people, or you should have offered us the choice. You want to go out west with these indigenous people, you want whatever. You want to stay where you are and we leave you the F alone? Because right now we are in the position to do something to these Southerners that will permanently put in place some protections. This was the missed opportunity of Reconstruction. Most people, Eric Foner and them, the rest of them, interpret it as, even Ken Burns, interpret it as this was the chance to make America realize its promise. Yeah, that's a social structure rendering. For me as an African in a governance formation, it was the chance to establish some relationship with the polity that offered us a status that might have been closer to the indigenous people. Amy Coney Barrett. Before I go, though, I do want to mention another amendment that isn't talked about a lot. I've been rereading this book recently. This is Retained by the People by the legal scholar Daniel Farber. Retained by the People, the silent Ninth Amendment and the constitutional rights Americans don't know they have. When you read the Ninth Amendment to the United States Constitution, let me read it to you right quick. To me, it's a fascinating amendment. All this stuff, if you're going off to law school, These are the intellectual battles that I hope you will fight in coming generations. I had a conversation with my Howard Law students all the time around the 13th Amendment. I got 2 students who are brilliant, who are writing on the 13th Amendment this semester for my class over there. Here's the 9th Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. One more time. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights, so think about all the rights that are in the Constitution. The 9th Amendment says, shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. The people who wrote the Constitution knew damn well that the things they listed weren't the only rights to be protected. The 9th Amendment is a linchpin amendment that was used along with the 14th Amendment, along with the 5th Amendment, to talk about a right to privacy. The racists, the misogynists, the ones who want women to be handmaids, and they saying, nah, it ain't no right to privacy. It's not written in the Constitution. Did you forget the 9th Amendment? Oh, we don't talk about the 9th Amendment. The racists hate the 9th Amendment because they thought about it in Philadelphia when they made this criminal enterprise up, and they said, we need an amendment to say, just because we didn't name a right in this thing, don't mean you don't have that right. Knowing that this was a constant debate, constant argument. It's not let us agree to agree in the sense that Marie Kelsey would use, but it is something that says you can put that case forward and we'll talk about it. The more numbers you have, the more power you have, the more organized power through participating in the polity you have, and you can change it. Elections don't matter, my vote don't matter. What I'm trying to tell y'all is it absolutely does if you want to participate. Now, if you want to fight them another way, I'm 10 toes down with you. But I'm saying when you fight them the other way and they lock your ass up, you're going to need some lawyers. Ask my man Molly Davis and the people at the National Conference of Black Lawyers. Ask Aja Adiatoro, whose birthday was last week, about that. Ask Nkechi Taifa. Ask Chokwe Lumumba. Ask Gaidi Henry, Gaidi Obadeli, Baba Mari's brother. You're going to need some lawyers. And when you go in court with them lawyers, you don't want them to get up and say, hey, man, I don't recognize none of this. It's not going to help you. So those of you who think, you got admiralty law, the law of the sea, or you're a Moor or something like that, ask Wesley Snipes how that worked out. I'm saying there is a sovereignty case to be made, but you're going to have to be a lot sharper than reading a couple of books and watching a couple of YouTube videos and you run up in there all naked and unashamed. And because you are not, you're not Sauer. Sauer ran up in there and got his booty handed to him. And he's the damn Solicitor General of the United States. We don't have that same kind of status. Let me bring this to a close. We've kind of gone over a little bit. What is the principle involved here? And this is why I want to bring it up. And we'll close with this. Amy Coney Barrett asked Sauer, what about the children of the Africans? That's I'm calling it that. She called it slaves. He said, at the time, before there was a 14th Amendment, were they domiciled in the U.S.? You hear him, yeah, I mean, they had a status here. And yeah, they're not citizens. They're captives. And she said, but these people want to go back to where they came from. They, he said, well, they're not subject. Once they're here, yes, they sue, but they have a permanent status. Okay. What about their children? He don't have no good answer for that, except they belong here with us because we said they did, to the descendants of slaves community. Your whole argument on reparations and lineage, you know what you're doing when you do that? I think we should think about that. Your status relative to the polity, I'm thinking we should be more like the indigenous people and that there's a case to be made, maybe even a 13th Amendment case. And I think that's something we need to think about and talk about. Ironically, the ADOS argument, the FBA argument, only works as a complete and utter surrender of self to the capturing polity. The only way you can even begin to make your argument, which is a deeply flawed and really unworkable legal argument, the only way you can even start to make it is to say that our existence as people begins as captives. Now, I know you're willing to do that because in some kind of way, some kind of weird way, you love your master. If you claim you don't love your master, then why would you answer the question differently than what Amy Coney Barrett asked him and said, everybody who came here was trying to go back to where they came from? And the answer the racist gave was, well, no. Once they're here, they're subject to us and they're domiciled here. The ADOS argument only works if it is a surrender, complete and utter surrender of yourself to the capturing polity. Amy Coney Barrett's question to an ADOS lawyer, to an FBA lawyer, and perhaps to a B1 lawyer, depending on how you define blackness, could only yield well, we were slaves, but our allegiance was to the captor. So we agreed that we were domiciled here, and that made the reparations claim one commingled with a pre-citizenship status, because there's no citizenship clause yet, as the foundation for your identity, which would also open the door to you siding with these racists against many of the children of immigrants today, which, here's the bombshell, I think we all know the answer, which would suit many of the blackface natives just fine. Y'all would be on sour side in this argument, and I think y'all cool with that. But this is white supremacy's last stand. You see what Viktor Orban, there's an election coming up in the parliaments in Hungary. He's looking like he might lose. So all the white nationalists ran over there. Bibi, Netanyahu's son, was over there in Hungary for the CPAC rally. Trump sent a message over there. Bannon was over there. John Oliver did a great send-up of Orban this past week and last week tonight. And the white nationalists who are rallying to him, who are rallying to Viktor Orban to create the illusion of participation through elections, because they have elections in Hungary. But now they got a slim moment where they might be able to flip it and try to claw back some of the meaning of their citizenship. Here in the United States, you got people saying, voting don't matter, you shouldn't vote. Globally, Israel has become the irritant in the last triggered global war for white supremacy. Note the death penalty law they enacted this week that passed the Knesset this week. And they popping champagne corks. If you are a citizen of Israel and you're Palestinian, you can get the death penalty. They said for behavior or speech that would say that you don't agree with Israel's right to exist. Yeah, but guess what? If you are Israeli and not Palestinian, this death penalty law doesn't apply to you. It's going to be very hard to prosecute you. Citizenship, in other words, is a malleable category in Israel. You Palestinian, I'm a citizen of Israel. No, not in the same way. We got tiers of citizenship. You can't never be no citizen like us. This is why Jimmy Carter said it's apartheid. The racists of the United States want to maintain their top tier of citizenship and make it as white as possible, which is why they were in court trying to break the back of plain language to say that if you were born here, but your parents weren't subject to the jurisdiction thereof, a legal fiction, because everybody here is subject to the laws of the United States, regardless of where you came from. Again, don't try to make sense of it. It doesn't make sense. If they can get that, I want y'all to watch this. How long before, if they would succeed in this case, Trump versus Barbara, they start moving to other tests of citizenship, like, oh, I don't know. Oh, yeah, something else. See, John Sauer argued this week. Domicile doesn't just mean you live somewhere. That means you've demonstrated allegiance to the jurisdiction. Your presence also comes with allegiance, meaning I'm not going back to where I am and I agree that this is the place and I follow the law. Well, guess what? If they can break the back of the plain language of the 14th Amendment, which I don't think they're going to be able to do, only question is they're going to use the statute to do it or the 14th Amendment to do it. If they are able to do that, how long before they then start talking about allegiance? Domicile means allegiance. And then start asking you for loyalty documentation. Let me see evidence that you actually believe that this man is your Lord and Master, or that this law is correct. All this kind of thing. Or, First Amendment be damned. We got a First Amendment right. Do you? Do you have a First Amendment right? It's not just freedom of speech, it's freedom of association. And sure, that might have worked in years past, but if they can get this, you Negroes who think somehow this only going to apply to the Mexicans or the Chinese or whoever come here from Salvador or, okay, now they stuck in an allegiance clause. Please understand, I was with a group of students who was listening to James Foreman Jr., good brother James Foreman, who is at Yale Law School, the son of the great civil rights warrior, human rights warrior, James Foreman Sr. He was over at Howard Law School last week. And Foreman brought up something very interesting. He's got a program where they recruit people to come to Yale Law School, any age, this kind of thing. He said, what you're seeing now is a situation where there are people who are using the rule of law to kind of fight for our common humanity, what I'm calling our common humanity. And they're going against people who have no respect at all for the law. That's Trump's crew. and the white nationalists who are before Trump and will come after him. Remember, Bondi ain't the first attorney general he got rid of. Remember the littlest rebel, not Shirley Temple, but Jeff Sessions? He got rid of him too. All these people, white nationalists like Barr, who wouldn't just go out and put bullets in people, so he quit as attorney general, this kind of thing. So it's not just Trump, it's the philosophy. What Foreman said was, if we created a program at Yale that said we're going to offer admission, he said New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is now, is about 20% white. He said the rest of it, maybe 10% Asian. He said the rest is about 35% black, 35% Latino. But he said if you just go with low income, it's about half black and half brown, 50-50. He said if we created a program that said we're going to allow low income first generation students to enroll at Yale Law School and set aside this many seats for them, guess what? From New Haven, guess what? The whole entering class is going to be black and brown. He said, but guess what? Once we do that, people like Ed Bloom, y'all saw what Ed Bloom did this week, that miserable guy. He went to court trying to sue the Congressional Black Caucus, saying them scholarships they give out are racist because they exclude white people. Well, he said they would go to court. He said, I think they would lose, but here's the problem. You got people who are willing to set up things that would pass legal muster. And then you got a bunch of other people, law firms, scary ass academics, others who are like, we're not going to fight them. Even though it's clearly illegal, we're just going to wait and see what happens. This is a problem, y'all. You got to fight these people. And even if in court, you might not think you can win, but they want you to think you can't win. So they don't want you to fight. That's why they file these cases. This goes back to the beginning as we answered earlier. And of course, this thing that they're doing at the EEOC, the chair of the EEOC, the Equal Opportunity Commission, Andrea Lucas, putting this letter out saying that, if you're white, you've been discriminated against. Let me tell you what that's about. Here's the strategy. This is Ed Bloom's strategy and all the racists who are trying to get rid of anything that we're trying to do for ourselves, even when it's put in a class situation and not racial. Number one, eliminate programs that help blacks, even when it's black money. We saw with the Fearless Fund. And then step two, if they are able to survive that legal muster, passing that like a class-based thing could and would, when class is used as a legally sound alternative, claim racial discrimination against whites. Well, it said that anybody poor, first generation, would come to Yale. Hello, Mr. Bloom? Yeah, I'm white. It don't apply to me. They didn't say race. Yes, but everybody in that category is black or brown. So therefore, by definition, it excludes me. Huh? ADOS? Y'all run around talking about lineage? Just like class is a proxy for lineage in that hypo, guess what else is a proxy for race? Lineage. Did I explain it to you that time in a way that penetrated? I know y'all still going to. I hope some of y'all come. I know, Prof, you don't like the trolls in the YouTube side and stuff, but I love it. I eat them for breakfast. It's funny. A little snack. I just explained it to you again. Class is a proxy for race, according to Ed Bloom and them. So too is lineage, ADOS. It's not going to save you. Now, I want to say a word about Nick. And here's where I am on that. Like I said, we're in conversation. We stay tuned. But here's the larger problems. Listen to Cliff and Latasha, Cliff Albright, Latasha Brown this week. We've all been talking with them. This is the 10-year celebration and anniversary of Black Voters Matter. As I said, stay tuned. But in this work, we assume things about our governance formations that aren't correct. Governance is who we are to each other. Governance is the ways we interact with each other. But celebrity influence in a society is a failure of our imagination, of our infrastructure. Cliff and Latasha, they're about to go on another bus tour. They're always on the blackest bus in the country. They're always going around organizing it. You got to do that to build the governance formation. We can't just assume it. We talk about ourselves as if we're organized and got this polity that we're moving in as a collective because everybody had the same opinion on social media. No, we assume things about our governance formations that aren't correct, like we have a coherent political formation rather than reactions and impressions. Look at the vote, not vote discussion. Look, I think it's a symptom of a deeper problem. Here's the deeper problem. The erosion of Black institutions. Instagram, TikTok, they're not Black institutions. My man, Mark Anthony Hill, Mark Anthony Neal, he's also my man, but my man, Mark Lamont Hill, talking on the Joe Budden podcast. That's not an institution. It's people talking. They're not Black institutions. They are mediated spaces for cacophony. They are mediated spaces for noise, for distractions. And hey, talk in them, debate about them. But I'd just rather watch University of South Carolina women's basketball team beat Gino Auriemma's squad than I would a bunch of people sitting around talking on microphones. Or I just watch Deion Cole talk to them comedians and laugh like hell because it's just two Black men having conversations. And I'm like, this is funny to me. Now let me get back to work. What I'm not going to do is treat these political conversations as elevated to the standard they should have, because none of these people are affiliated with organizations. It's just people talking, and celebrity is evidence of a malaise, not evidence of anything we should be listening to, whether it's Stephen A. Smith or Don Lemon. Okay, fine, y'all talk. It's no problem. Whether it's Nick Cannon, Amber Rose, you talk. But since you have people's attention, if you are a citizen of our polity, if you are a member in our polity, then there should be not only the certainty of your membership, but an expectation of certain other things. I think y'all can read between the lines on where I'm going with this. Blackness in this country is a permanent underclass. The ideal of fidelity to Blackness is a tenuous one. It's tenuous, meaning that people are always trying to escape it while looking like they're not trying to escape it. Shout out to Sean Carter. The old idea is that I am Black, but I want to move in a way where I can be Black and also be white in terms of that status, not racially, in terms of class. Celebrity influence is a failure of our imagination. We're a permanent underclass in this country. Why? I was talking to my Howard students this week. We were in the hip hop class. We were talking about the Rodney King rebellions in 1992 and the music that came out during that period. You know, this is also the 90s where the Soulquarians started to emerge. And a lot of stuff that young people don't know. But I asked them, do you have any experiences with being stopped by the police? These are young people who go from top of the so-called class to bottom of the so-called class. I'm talking about academic class. I'm talking about socioeconomic concern. And I'm talking about children who have been children when their parents have been stopped by the police. One young lady, heartbreaking. She said, my daddy got stopped by the police, had a taillight out, was all problematic. The cop was getting ready to really go in, and he looked in the back seat and saw my baby seat. He let us go that time. Another young lady said, my parents got stopped and we had a little bit of tint on the window, and the cop came up getting all husky and looked in the back and saw all of us and said, I'm going to let you go with a warning. These are stories, and I'm telling you, this is one reason why HBCUs are so important. And I know y'all thought I was leaving all the valences last week, but that was April Fool's. But anyway, I'm not going to say less about that. But the point is this, the whole notion that we can escape that permanent underclass by anything other than organizing, by anything other than getting together individually into a collective by agreeing, as Barbara Birthright would say, to agree, is a fantasy. Celebrity influence is a failure of our imagination, of our infrastructure. It's a failure. And as a failure, we have to understand that we have to have the right principles. We're not going to beat anything as individuals. And as we go through these arguments on citizenship, we should understand consensus has to be at the heart of that. And as we're building consensus, we can use the science and technology, but we should not center the science and technology as our organizing thrust. We have to center that real work, and that happens in real time, face to face. Stop.
Yeah. And shouldn't there be a responsibility on people who have an audience, who have a following, who open their mouths to get it right? Like, I feel like, if doctors have to take a Hippocratic oath, if you are in a position where people are following you, you should want to not do harm. And I think that's what I'm struggling with, that people are just willy-nilly. I know there's a responsibility on all of us, whether or not we elevate them by how we click and engage. Like, there's a responsibility on us to make sure that we're not elevating voices that are not studied. I had a woman call on Foolishness Friday, Stephanie I think she's originally from Delaware, but she took your class. She said, I was in the very first class. Did you hear her? She said, I was in the very first class. No. Carr at Howard was in a classroom in the 90s.
Yeah.
She said, in your class, I think it was like 2001 or 2003 or something.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Classroom, and she said you would just let people in. They would be sitting on the radiator. They would be filling it up before they moved you to an auditorium. She said, and she wrote a piece on you because she was so impressed with you. You remember this?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh. I
Top.
haven't thought about that in 20 years. Oh, that's close to 25 years now.
Yeah, 20.
Yes.
And she said she
In the
wrote.
hilltop. In the hilltop. Oh my God.
She said because she had never
Stephanie, yes.
that. Yeah. So
She plays soccer. I remember I don't call anyway. I ain't call her last name because it might not be her last name no more. She might have been married or changed her name. Yes, oh my gosh.
yeah. So I say all that to say,
Hmm.
everyone's not going to go get a PhD and a law degree and then go teach and devote their entire
Nope.
lives to the liberation and the education of people, not just Black people, but people. But if you're not going to do that, at least give the respect to the people that are doing that and make sure, like, I don't really move. If there's a question that I have, I'm calling you because I
We
don't know.
call each other.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
And I'm asking, like, people spouting off now, show your work. Drop a link. Inform us. Let us know where you have you arrived at that.
How could we enforce that? But I think this is why, first of all, I think that as a matter of principle, as do you. But as a matter of organizing, I don't think they have a responsibility. I think we have. In other words, there are many things I don't, even like what happened with Nick. I didn't see that. I saw it because people started texting me and Twitter. So immediately I was like, hey man, what? So he called me and now we talking. Like, oh, what? But my point is that I didn't see it because I don't watch that stuff.
Right.
And I'm saying, I mean, but I am aware of it. And in moments I will sample it because, again, I got students like you got students and we have responsibility. You have extended that responsibility to me by inviting me to say, okay, I'm going to trust you on these airwaves. And that's because we know each other, not. But I'm going to do that. I ain't never going to do nothing to disrespect the legacy of Joe Madison or all the other broadcasters, Bob Law and them, just like you came into a profession and said, I'm going to maintain and elevate this standard. But celebrities, no, they're under no obligation. But we are under obligation to turn them off. And guess what? That still won't work because most of the people consuming that are people who love to watch us fight. Andy Cohen is a menace. He's an enemy of our common humanity. And people watch that Real Housewives stuff. He's sitting on the couch keying. And I'm like, dude, you will starve if you're waiting on me to support you with a penny. But hey, I can't stop the rest of the people. Because it's funnier to them to watch Hosea Williams' granddaughter looking for our railroad tracks in a church basement than it is their own self-respect.
Oh man!
And I'm saying that's been cultivated. So all I'm saying is, did you?
We've been called an echo chamber, and I'm zero tolerant. Like even in YouTube on my channel, people come in, they want to debate. I'm like, is this the forum to debate somebody? How are we debating in a comment section? What responsibility do I owe you to even go back and forth? I don't know you. I don't know what you're, and you're not providing any sources. So I'm arguing with you in a YouTube chat for what?
There
so
you go.
I'd rather block you because it's clear to me that you're not here to actually earn or even engage or inform. You just want the back and forth because maybe you're lonely. Maybe you don't have a whole lot of things going on in your life. Or maybe this is the only way you could feel substantial. So I'm zero tolerant. But I don't know if that's the best approach because I also feel like we do close ourselves off from people who might like, a straggler roach come in and go, oh, there's something going on here. Maybe I should stick around. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think it's the best approach always, but I don't think any absolute is always the case. So whereas, like you say, you would take that position, I would take the position of I'll listen to them. Now, like we have Knarrative in Nubia, right? We have a space where we can have that conversation. And then out of that space, we go out and talk to everybody. And so that space, then the outside of that space becomes the thing where, well, you outside of it, so you got to know these people are. I'll give you an example. Ibrahim Traore, right? I mean, Traore is over there in Burkina Faso. We're all celebrating. We're all talking about it. Even as we got this LGBTQ issue, this in Ghana is also in Burkina. He was talking, I was watching something he was saying last week to some reporters. He's talking about, we've dissolved all the political parties because they're built on disagreement. He's right. There are no political parties mentioned in the Constitution. George Washington was like, we don't need political party. The minute you set up a political party, you have set up a structure for arguing.
Yeah.
And so the one party state, and Nkrumah believed this as well. It creates disagreement. He was talking about it creates patronage. It reinforces division. That's true in a society, especially in a capitalist society where capital then picks winners and losers, because while we're arguing with each other, the capitalist has paid people on both sides. Right. And John Hope Bryant, I'm going to probably read he was on Roland the other night, and I asked him a question he couldn't answer, and then he getting ready to go to the New Edition show with Andrew Young. But I started by saying Dr. King told Andrew Young when they was arguing in Newark after they had met Baraka, and Andy Young said there's some problems with the system, but it can be fixed. And Martin Luther King said, be quiet, Andy. You need to be quiet because you're a capitalist and I'm not. So that knocked Bryant back on his heel. And then I said, what's the role of state capitalism, John? What's the state? In other words, that was my way of introducing socialism without saying socialism. State capitalism means you have all these people who have made all this money, but now you got to take a piece of that and give it to the people. So you know what he said? He said, oh, this is the question. Man, we ran out of time. He said, but you look at these Scandinavian countries, everybody make all this money, and then they take half the money and give it to the poor and say, yeah, see, I know, people hear you and they think it's all about 401ks and flipping and good credit scores, but what you just did was make yourself an enemy of Elon Musk and them. People misinterpret because the state has a responsibility. Celebrities earn your wealth or earn your whatever the hell it is, earn your leisure and all this kind of stuff. You guys are misleading Black people. I told what I began with before I said about Martin Luther King. I said, I'm gonna tell you something, Mr. Bryant. I agree with the title of your book. Capitalism is for all. We're all in it. It requires a permanent underclass. It requires a working class to siphon that labor off. So it is for all. But my question is about state capitalism. And he did not only have any pushback, I guess he realized he couldn't disagree with it. But I guess what I'm saying is that celebrities, you can't get out of this by listening to people who haven't studied. And the reason we listen to them is because so many of us want to be them. I want your money. I want your car. Okay.
I want your life.
Win that argument. And I want your life. Yes. Yes.
That was the other thing. I think the reason why we vibe so closely is because neither one of us is driven by money. Both of us. Because I look at money as currency, as an ability to be able to do all of the things, but you don't need a whole lot of it to do all of the things if you have people.
That's right.
People. So we usually are pouring it back in. We're buying books and making sure
that's what I'm saying. I get $1 instead of it's going to the bookstore. Yes, no question.
And I do it by building, lanes and things, and it's fulfilling, and we can still live well. You don't need all the things. I do agree. Bomani said this as well. Bomani Joe's like, there should be no aspiration to become a billionaire. There should be no aspiration to even become what is that status doing?
What is that?
Like, there who's paying their bills and living well is good enough. Like, we don't need the overflow is the drug. And I think when you have a society where you're dangling that for everyone to aspire to, that's the trick. That's the trick. And the trick is community.
Yes.
The real trick is for how do we figure out how to live together where everyone eats.
That's right.
I live in a society where people are not eating and where people do not have roofs over their heads and where people are desperate. Don't you? You don't want that, right? So
that's right.
A lot of work to do. And as far as debate, somebody said debate is healthy. Debate's only healthy if we both know stuff. Why would we debate who haven't done any study? They just got an opinion. That's not a debate.
It's not a debate. It's not a debate. And you're right. Agree to agree, but let's agree to have some common standards. It was so funny. I had a couple of former students who were in the room for the oral arguments. So they saw Trump come in. In fact, one came to my class Wednesday night because we're debriefing after this. None of my law students had been there, but I had a student who was an undergrad who graduated a couple years ago who works on the Hill. So she came by. And when she came in, I said, okay, we was waiting on you. Give us the debrief. What's going on? She said, Trump came in. And I also have a former Secret Service officer who is now finishing his law degree at Howard, brilliant brother who was on Trump's detail in the first year. So, I mean, all this stuff he co-signed. This is how they came in. He said, she said, Trump came in. He's glowering at the judges. Exactly what you said. He's making faces, like he can control like something. And then when it was clear that Sauer was getting his booty handed to him, he got mad. And then as soon as Sauer finished, he got up and left. He said the vibe was so weird because he thought he could come in. But to the point you're raising, John Sauer is an attorney. His argument was absurd, but he made it to the best of its absurd conclusions, and those justices treated him with respect because he was making his argument, but they tore him a new hole. If you're talking about argument like that, I'm here for it. But what he didn't do is get up and say, look, these people are not citizens because they're some of them are Moors, and some of them came from Mars, and actually some of the original inhabitants were black, and so therefore, man, they would have said, get the doctor for this guy. So yeah, I think we have to find a balance. So let me ask you: Would you do what Mark does? Would you sit with Joe Budden and be in that conversation?
I couldn't.
No, look on your face.
No, I'm allergic to ignorance, so I just like I have a visceral reaction, when it's just so palpable. At the same time, there's a difference. If I'm in a classroom with students who don't know things, as you
yes,
so gracious, and I think I was very gracious in the classroom too, evidenced by
no question,
surrounded by my former students. Your former students are everywhere.
Yes,
everywhere.
No question.
There's a graciousness to people who are seeking knowledge, and we're figuring out together. That's one of our methods. We're learning with our students, and they get to be part of the experience of learning together, right? But if you're in a room full of know-it-alls that know nothing, and I appreciate Mark, because somebody's got to do it, because there have been moments where he has
I do too.
A mirror, and it's been so revelatory that
I do too.
And I feel like we're all made to do different things. I'm not built that way. I'm crashed out. I have, moments of like it. And once I realize that you are not here honestly, and to me, if you have a platform, you have a responsibility, right? So
true.
The fact that you are dumb and you don't know, but you still running your mouth, that pisses me off at a level that I think, because it's criminal to me. We have too much work to see people that need to know stuff. How dare you? How dare you? So that's interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if I can hold
that's interesting. Yeah. No. It's interesting you say that, because I'm thinking about even in terms of this notion of generosity, of being open. Like you say, you treated your students and treat your students with that type of generosity because they are genuinely there, and they don't know, and they're there because they don't know. Help me. It's okay. I can hear that. I can feel that. Mark is very generous in the sense that he'll go in those spaces, and even when he's disagreeing, he's still going to push it. Okay, like you said, like me, I couldn't sit there. It's not only that intolerance for ignorance, but there are other places where that generosity can be rewarded differently. Because also these people are trying to make all this money, as you say, they're trying to be celebrities. When you talk about that ability to sit with people and think through things together, some of it is about intent. As you say, that's why, if your intent, and I'll go this far, I won't say a whole lot more about it. Like I said, conversation, but with somebody like Nick, one thing I do know about him is the generosity. Now, I don't know why you riding around here with disability, but the thing that has gotten Nick in trouble, this is what happened with Griff out there when the whole thing almost went sideways with Shelly Ailson and them. Man, don't be, he said, but these are my friends. No, what? But my point is that so you're willing to talk to everybody, huh? Okay, well, I'm going to give you some more everybody's again. And then we're going to because I know you won't say no, but here's the problem. There are people who are so concerned with promoting themselves and doing whatever they're doing that they will do stuff deliberately. I don't know, Prof. It's tough because you're not
simple. It's real simple.
Well,
we all have platforms. Right? We're on YouTube, and you and I will fight.
We all don't have platforms. You got a platform that's big. We all have platforms.
Everybody has right now the ability to start a YouTube channel, to start a whatever. Everybody. And when I came into Sirius XM, I had 2,000 followers on Twitter. 2,000. I remember. Nobody knew because I wasn't like active on social media. I'm out here working. I'm doing books and all. I don't care about all of that. You don't care about all of that. But when I came to Sirius, I was like, oh, they care about numbers. So I was like, I got to. How do I do that? And I remember this conversation like it was yesterday. Stephen A. said to me, because I'm like, people in here, they're fighting and stuff. He said, let them fight. Let them come on your page, because then they're going to come in and the people come and defend you. And then that's how you blow up your thing. And in that moment, I knew he was right.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to fight with. I don't want to spend my days watching people fight on my page, or even starting fights or being in fights. I'd rather just do this. So I made a conscious decision that if I'm going to build a quote unquote audience, it's going to be with people of like minds who are here to do something, who are here to roll up their sleeve. I don't care about the back and forth. I'm not doing things for clicks and algorithms. And ironically, we've been able to build with people without having to do that. And so I'm kind
Absolutely.
of to myself, I needed to prove
Absolutely.
that if people really cared, if there was a place for them to come, Knarrative in Nubia only exists because people said, I want to be a part of something. We're sitting here
Absolutely.
right now.
Absolutely.
So again, the model, yes, that model works, and it's infinitely more lucrative. Let me say that. The amount of money you can make in that space is,
And the amount of money you can have and redistribute, like you said, the amount of resources, right?
they rarely redistribute it. And I think that's the other trick, right? Like you get $100 million contract, $200 million contract. Very rare are those people doing the socialist thing, which I think is, to me, the only reason why you have money is to make sure everybody is good. Not just your family,
Right.
not just your family.
That's right.
Everybody be good.
That's right.
But
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Getting drug, and then what you have to exchange for that sometimes puts you in a bind where, you know, I gave you this money. There's an expectation. And even if it's not spoken, you're going to have to do some things. And you feel like there's an allegiance to that over the allegiance to the people. If you build your thing with the people, nobody can take that from you. And it's not about the platform anymore. It's about you and your relationship to your people, period.
That's exactly right. That's it. You know what? I'm glad you said that, because of course here we sit here. We didn't talk about no kings. Everybody out in the street, now it's got to transform into a political action. But you're not a subject. You're absolutely right. If it's with the people, that means you're not the ruler. You're with the people. So when we talk about citizens or subjects, when you belong to a community and you have a certainty of belonging, then you know that they can't come for you. They will come for all of us.
They're gonna
And
come.
that was what's
They
got
can't
to
come, but
they can't come.
they may be surprised by what responds to them.
No question.
They're gonna come.
No question.
Because the arrogance of it or whatever, but they don't know. They don't know. What's coming with it. And
That's
I think
right.
the other question, those people who want to have a platform, and I don't even understand that. The desire to want to be famous or whatever. This is not how I'm wired. But God bless. But
God bless.
Are you feeding people? Because I feel like, ultimately, no matter what, we're all flawed. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to misspeak. We're going to do all of the things. But at the core of who you are, and I do believe that about Nick Cannon, that he's not a horrible person. I do think he cares about people. I think he should be quiet because he's stupid. But I think I don't think he's doing it particularly to, he just got caught up in just being dumb. But I do think
being dumb.
Some people are out here doing things strategic.
Oh, no question.
Because the position is way to be impenetrable because of their ego or whatever. But I think the question should be asked of yourself: am I feeding people? Am I delivering things that are, good fruit? Am I putting out good fruit, or what is it? Meta nefer? Good speech, good fruit.
There you go. There it is. Yes. Yes. We don't know. You would know better now because you've been in those spaces. I've never been in any of those spaces. But I almost feel like you can tell when you're doing it for people. Like when I don't know that I've ever heard a sports coach as invested in the humanity of their young charges as a Dawn Staley. When she talks about them, she knows everything about them. Like, who would you trust as your dog? I can't trust Raven. I can't trust, and when they had that moment, it was interesting because Dawn Staley, clearly whatever this fool said to her, but around her people were kind of like, and then Gino Orema walked by himself to the left. Your people wasn't with you.
Oh,
so that told me something about
not one of his coaches, black lady, came and grabbed him and was like, stop.
Yes.
Stop. What are you doing? Stop.
What are you doing? Yes.
To your point. And this is how you know. This is how you know.
This is how you know.
One of her students, and again, she cares about their development because Tessa
No question.
graduated, got her degree, she's getting her master's. But there was a major that wasn't existing at South Carolina that one of her basketball players wanted to major in. She went to the administration and they created that major. You know, wow. She advocated, but this is what it takes when you're in a position of power. Like, who are you serving while you're there? For her, it's clearly about basketball. It's clearly not. And I look at poor Malaysia Fool, who I know is regretting her life choices, and whoever was in the ear telling her she would get more playing time or whatever. She misses what we saw with the camaraderie, the thing that you saw with those girls in the locker room and how they love each other. That's something that comes from the coach. You're right.
That's right.
The other team's coach walked off. His players were not there with him. And when that entire bench, he would have gotten jumped in that arena.
No question.
Okay.
No question.
Anyway, I'm going to say less about that. But yeah.
No. That's a beautiful thing. Thank you, Prof. That's a powerful lesson. We wish them best of luck tomorrow. I hope she can go on and bring it home.
Let me just say this. At this point, I want her to win, but I just needed her to beat Gino because he represents everything that is wrong.
No question.
In the world. Right now, he represents everything that is wrong in the world. This kind of overseer sitting up there on a perch and overseeing these women and being able to be this king or whatever in a women's dominated sport, and just nasty. He was nasty to Pat Summitt, called her out of her name. Pat Summitt, like he was a human being, and the fact that he was most winningest coaches. I just needed that to happen. I feel like the world is right now. I don't care. You know, I want her to win, but I don't care. I just needed him to lose. And
she already won.
Life. How about that? That's what.
How about that?
His mama said. Dawn Staley and her team, they're winning at life.
They're winning at life.
So are you. So are you.
Professor Hunter, so are you. Love you. Happy Easter, y'all. I know he is a Riz tomorrow. Y'all get up, put y'all suits on. Go do your thing. Love you. See you later. All right.
Creates allegiance. That's
General, you said in your reply brief that the children of slaves who were brought here unlawfully, in defiance of laws forbidding the slave trade, would in fact be citizens. And we can imagine that their parents were not only brought here in violation of United States law, but were here against their will, and so maybe felt allegiance to the countries where they were from. And you say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual. So how do you get there? You say it in just a few sentences, so can you elaborate?
Sure. If you look at the 19th century sources, what you see is that even though their entry may have been unlawful, 19th century antebellum law never treated their presence as unlawful. In fact, quite the opposite. One of the amici, in fact, points to like a Mississippi statute, which probably is replicated throughout the South before the Civil War, that says slaves in Mississippi have an indefeasible domicile in Mississippi. In other words, even if they run away, if they get away, Mississippi says, nope, you still live here. Right. And so it would be astonishing, in other words, for the opponents of the 14th Amendment to say, oh, these people were not domiciled and therefore it goes the other way, because actually U.S. law, even if they were brought in illegally and through an illegal slave trade, once they were there by
their intent is to return as soon as they can, let's say. So they're here, they're resident, and maybe under your theory, which says, lawfulness for a different purpose, but they're here, they're resident, let's take your assumption that they're not here unlawfully. But let's say they don't have an intent to stay. They want to escape and go back the second they can. Are they domiciled?
Under the 19th century law, I think this is the flip side of the hypothetical that we talked about earlier. Under 19th century law, they are treated as domiciled in the United States, so it'd be astonishing. And the debates in the congressional floor talk about not this specific case, but to say, look, slaves who have been forced to come here and have been here are lawfully domiciled here. They don't use the ways domiciled like they use allegiance. They say they don't have allegiance to, once they've been forced to come here, they don't have allegiance to any